The moment Clara Hayes called the most dangerous man in New York baby, she knew she was dead. One slip of the tongue in a back room filled with killers, one careless word to Adrian Versetti, the Mafia boss who'd built an empire on fear and blood. She should have been executed on the spot. Instead, he smiled. That smile would change everything. This is the story of a desperate law student who gambled with her life and ended up playing for keeps in a world where love is the deadliest weapon of all. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made Clara Hayes want to scream. She'd been staring at the same pamphlet about pediatric leukemia for 20 minutes, the words blurring together into meaningless shapes, while her 7-year-old niece Emma slept 3 floors above her, hooked up to machines that beeped out the rhythm of a life that was slipping away. Clara's phone sat on her lap like a loaded gun. The screen showed her bank balance, $247.38. The bill for Emma's experimental treatment sat folded in her jacket pocket, and she didn't need to look at it again to know the number, $127,000. Might as well have been $1 billion. Ms. Hayes? A nurse appeared in her peripheral vision, young and tired, with the kind of professionally sympathetic expression that Clara had come to hate over the past 6 months. Visiting hours are over in 15 minutes. Clara nodded without looking up. I know. The nurse hesitated, then moved on to harass someone else. Clara stayed planted in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her law book scattered around her feet like casualties of a war she was losing. Constitutional Law 3 and Evidence and Procedure. All useless when the only thing that mattered was money she didn't have. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Melissa. That sketchy offer still on the table? Clara's stomach twisted. The sketchy offer had come 3 days ago through a friend of someone Melissa had dated once. High-end catering company, 1 night only, paid in cash. The kind of gig where you didn't ask questions because you already knew the answers would keep you up at night. Wait staff for a private event at some warehouse in Red Hook. $500 for 6 hours of work. Normally, Clara would have deleted the contact information immediately, but normally, her niece wasn't dying. She typed back, "How sketchy are we talking?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then, "Rich men behaving badly sketchy. Not illegal, just elite and gross. My friend did it last month, said the tips were insane." Clara looked up at the ceiling tiles, counting the water stains, 12 visible from where she sat. She'd memorized every imperfection in this waiting room over the past 6 months, ever since her sister Diane had called her sobbing at 3 a.m. with the diagnosis. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Aggressive. Emma needed treatment that insurance classified as experimental, which was corporate speak for, "We're not paying for that." Diane worked 2 jobs already. Clara worked 1 and went to law school full-time. Together, they'd scraped up enough for the first round of treatment. But the cancer didn't care about their payment plan. "Send me the details," Clara texted back. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. A contact named Victor with a Brooklyn number. Below it, Melissa had written, "He sounds Russian. Don't be late. Dress all black. Nice black if you have it." Clara didn't have nice black. She had Target black and a pair of dress pants she'd bought for mock trial that were starting to shine at the knees. But she had a white button-down that looked professional if you didn't inspect the collar too closely, and she had desperation, which apparently counted for something in the service industry. She stayed until they kicked her out at 9, then rode the subway back to the apartment she shared with Melissa and another law school student in Washington Heights. The train was half empty, filled with the kind of people who worked when everyone else slept, nurses and security guards and cleaning crews. Clara caught her reflection in the dark window across from her seat. 24 years old, but looking closer to 30, with shadows under her eyes that had become permanent residents and hair, she kept pulling back into the same messy bun because she couldn't remember the last time she'd had the energy to do anything else with it. Her phone rang. Diane's number. "Hey," Clara said, pressing the phone to her ear. "Did you eat today?" Diane's voice came through tight and exhausted. She'd been staying at the hospital, sleeping in the chair beside Emma's bed. "Yes." A lie. Clara couldn't remember her last meal. "Liar." Diane knew her too well. There's leftover Chinese in the fridge at home. Heat it up. I will. Another lie. The Chinese food was probably growing its own ecosystem by now. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. The prognosis. The money. The fact that their parents had died in a car accident when Clara was 18 and Diane was 22, and now it was just the two of them trying to keep Emma alive with duct tape and prayer. I'm picking up an extra shift tomorrow, Clara said finally. Catering gig, good money. Clara, it's fine, just some rich people's party. In and out. She could hear Diane's doubt through the silence. Just be careful, okay? Always am. Another lie. But what else was new? The warehouse in Red Hook looked exactly like the kind of place where people disappeared. Clara stood outside the rusted metal door at 11:45 p.m. on Friday, 15 minutes early because desperate people were always punctual, and wondered if this was the stupidest decision she'd ever made. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Doors open. Third floor. Ask for Polly. Clara took a breath and pulled the door open. Inside, the building transformed. What looked like an abandoned shipping warehouse from the outside revealed itself as something else entirely. A maze of staircases and corridors that had been cleaned and maintained, leading up into darkness. Clara climbed, her cheap flats echoing on metal steps, until she reached the third floor and emerged into chaos. 20 other servers, mostly women, moved through a large room that had been converted into a staging area. A man in his 50s with slicked-back gray hair and an expensive watch was barking orders in accented English. Polly, Clara guessed. You're new, he said when he spotted her, looking her up and down with the kind of assessment that made Clara's skin crawl. Melissa's friend? Clara Hayes. You know how to carry a tray without dropping it? Yes. You know how to keep your mouth shut and your eyes down? Clara hesitated. What kind of event is this? Polly smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The kind where you make $500 cash for 6 hours of work and you don't ask stupid questions. You in or out, because I got 3 girls waiting who'd kill for your spot. Clara thought of Emma. The machines, the beeping, the number on the bill in her pocket. I'm in. Good. You work the back room, VIP section. Keep the drinks flowing, clear the plates, stay invisible. And whatever you see, whatever you hear, didn't happen. Capiche? Capiche, Clara repeated, the word tasting foreign in her mouth. Polly handed her a tray and pointed toward a set of double doors. Through there. And Hayes, smile pretty. These men like pretty. Clara wanted to throw the tray at his head. Instead, she smiled pretty and pushed through the doors. The main floor had been transformed into something out of a gangster movie. Heavy velvet curtains, dim lighting, tables arranged in a semicircle around a center stage. Expensive suits everywhere, the kind that cost more than Clara's annual tuition. The air smelled like cigar smoke and money and something else. Danger, maybe. Or just the particular cocktail of testosterone and power that came from men who weren't used to hearing the word no. Clara moved through the crowd with her tray of champagne flutes, keeping her eyes down like Polly had instructed. The conversations around her were a mix of English, Italian, Russian, and languages she couldn't identify. Business talk, numbers, territories. Things that sounded legitimate on the surface but carried undertones that made Clara's law school instincts scream about RICO statutes and racketeering. She was refilling drinks at a corner table when she heard it, a name that made her freeze mid-pour. Versetti's late. Versetti's always late. It's a power play. Yeah, well, the Russians aren't happy about it. Clara's hand shook slightly as she finished pouring. Adrian Versetti. Even someone as deliberately oblivious as Clara had tried to be about New York's criminal underworld knew that name. The tabloids called him the Prince of Manhattan, which was a polite way of saying he ran half the organized crime on the East Coast and had enough legitimate business fronts to make prosecution nearly impossible. Forbes estimated his net worth at $800 million. The FBI estimated his body count higher, and Clara was serving champagne at his party. She moved away from the table carefully, trying to control her breathing. This was fine. She'd work her shift, take her money, and never come back. She could compartmentalize. Law school had taught her that, at least, the ability to separate what she knew from what she could prove, what was right from what was necessary. The double doors at the far end of the room opened. The entire atmosphere shifted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Men stood. It wasn't fear exactly. These weren't the kind of men who showed fear, but it was respect enforced by something that looked a lot like fear. Adrian Vercetti walked in like he owned not just the room, but the entire concept of rooms. Clara had seen his picture in the tabloids. Grainy surveillance photos and the occasional charity gala shot. None of them had prepared her for the reality. He was tall, 6'2" or 6'3", with the kind of build that came from actual physical work rather than a gym membership. Dark hair, sharp features, a face that would have been almost pretty if not for the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone and the eyes. Jesus, those eyes. Dark and calculating and completely void of anything resembling mercy. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Emma's treatment. Custom-tailored, charcoal gray, with a black shirt underneath and no tie. The kind of outfit that said he knew exactly how good he looked and didn't need to try. Two men flanked him. One was massive, probably 6'5", built like a tank with a shaved head and tattoos creeping up his neck. The other was leaner, wearing glasses, carrying a tablet. The accountant, maybe, or the lawyer. Every crime boss needed both. Vercetti's gaze swept the room with the precision of a predator cataloging prey. For one heart-stopping second, his eyes landed on Clara. She looked down immediately, staring at her tray like it held the secrets of the universe. When she glanced up again, he'd moved on, taking a seat at the center table where the most expensive-looking men had gathered. The massive bodyguard stood behind him. The man with the tablet sat to his right. Clara made herself move, circulating with her tray, refilling glasses, clearing plates, staying invisible. The evening progressed. Deals were made in coded language. Money changed hands, or at least the promise of money, delivered through handshakes and nods that carried the weight of contracts. Clara kept her head down and her ears open, storing away information she'd probably need therapy to forget. It was nearly 2 a.m. when things started winding down. The crowd had thinned. Most of the servers had been dismissed. Clara was clearing glasses from a side table when Polly grabbed her arm. "Back room, VIP section needs a refresh." "I thought we weren't supposed to go back there." Polly's grip tightened. "You are when I tell you to. Move." The VIP section was behind another set of doors, through a corridor that felt more like a tunnel. The lighting was darker here, more intimate. Claire could hear voices, men laughing, the clink of glasses. She pushed through the final door and stopped. The back room was smaller, more exclusive. Heavy leather chairs, a mahogany table that looked antique, walls covered in what Clara suspected were real Picassos. And seated around the table, in a cloud of cigar smoke and casual menace, were the men who actually ran things. Adrian Vercetti sat at the head of the table. Clara kept her eyes down and moved quickly, collecting empty glasses, replacing ashtrays. The conversation continued around her like she was furniture. "The Russians are pushing into Brooklyn," someone was saying. Sokolov thinks too much and delivers too little." Vercetti cut him off. His voice was different from what Clara had expected. Educated. No trace of a New York accent. "He'll overextend, and when he does, we'll be ready." Clara reached for a glass near Vercetti's elbow. Her hand brushed his arm, just barely, just for a second. He didn't even glance at her. She was invisible. Good. She was almost to the door, her tray loaded with empty glasses and full ashtrays when it happened. Her cheap flat caught on the edge of an antique rug. Clara stumbled, the tray tilting. She caught it, barely, but not before several glasses slid to the edge. She grabbed for them, overcorrected, and sent one tumbling toward the table, toward Adrian Vercetti. His hand shot out, catching the glass midair without looking, without even pausing in his conversation. He set it down gently on the table. The room went silent. Clara stood frozen, tray in hand, every eye on her. "I'm so sorry," she started to say. And then, because she was exhausted and terrified and completely out of her depth, because her brain short-circuited under pressure and defaulted to the kind of casual language she used with Melissa, because the universe apparently had a sick sense of humor, she added, "I'm so sorry, baby." The silence became absolute. Clara's brain caught up with her mouth about 2 seconds too late. The word baby hung in the air like a confession at a murder trial. She'd just called Adrian Vercetti, the man who allegedly fed his enemies to pigs, who'd built an empire on fear and violence, who made grown men cross themselves when they said his name. Baby. in a room full of his closest associates, while holding a tray. This was how she died. Not in law school, not fighting for justice, but because she had the spatial awareness of a drunk giraffe and the verbal filter of a concussed parrot. Vercetti turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto Clara with the intensity of a sniper's scope. "What?" he said softly. "Did you just call me?" Clara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her brain was screaming at her to apologize, to beg, to run, but her body had apparently decided that freezing in terror was the better survival strategy. The massive bodyguard moved toward her, one hand going inside his jacket where Clara was absolutely certain there was a gun. "Marco," Vercetti said, his voice still soft. The bodyguard stopped. Vercetti stood, unfolding from his chair with predatory grace. He was even taller up close. Clara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, and that was a mistake because those eyes were looking at her like she was a particularly interesting specimen under a microscope. "You," Vercetti said, "are either the bravest or the stupidest person I've met in a very long time." Clara found her voice. It came out shaky but coherent. "Stupid. Definitely stupid. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I was just—" "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Hayes." "Clara Hayes." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "And what are you doing serving drinks at my private event, Clara Hayes?" "I needed the money." The honesty surprised them both. Vercetti's eyebrow rose fractionally. "Everyone needs money," he said. "That's not an answer." Clara's exhaustion finally broke through her fear. "My niece has cancer. The treatment costs more than I'll make in 5 years. I'm a law student working 3 jobs, and it's still not enough. Melissa, my roommate, she got me this gig. I didn't know it was—" She gestured vaguely at the room, at him, at everything. "This. You didn't know," Vercetti repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe her. "I knew it was sketchy," Clara amended. "I didn't know it was you." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "And if you had known?" Clara thought about Emma, the machines, the beeping, the number that kept her awake at night. "I'd probably still be here," she admitted, "because $500 is $500 and my principals don't pay medical bills." The room was silent except for the soft hum of ventilation. The other men watched with the fascinated attention of people witnessing either a miracle or an execution. Vercetti studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Clara's heart stopped. This was it. He was going to pull out a gun and he pulled out a checkbook. Clara blinked. Vercetti uncapped an expensive pen and wrote something quickly, then tore off the check and held it out to her. "For your trouble," he said. Clara looked at the check, then looked again, then looked a third time because her eyes must be malfunctioning. The check was made out to Clara Hayes for $50,000. "I can't," she started. "You can," Vercetti interrupted. "Consider it an apology for Marco almost shooting you. He gets trigger-happy around disrespect." "I can't take this." Clara held the check like it might explode. It's too much. It's nothing," Vercetti said, and the casual way he said it made Clara understand exactly how different their worlds were. $50,000 was nothing to him. It was barely a rounding error in his quarterly budget. "Take it. Get your niece her treatment." Clara's hands were shaking. The check trembled between her fingers. "Why?" "Because you amused me," Vercetti said simply, "and because I'm curious about someone stupid enough, your word, to call me baby in a room full of armed men." He gestured to Marco. "Get her contact information, address, phone number." Warning bells rang in Clara's head. "Why do you need my contact information?" Vercetti smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Because, Clara Hayes, you've caught my attention, and when I'm interested in something, I like to keep track of it." "I'm not a thing to keep track of." "No," he agreed. "You're a law student with more guts than sense who just called me baby. That makes you either very brave or very stupid, and I haven't decided which yet." He turned back to his associates, dismissing her with the gesture. "Marco, handle it, gently." Marco moved toward Clara, and this time she let him guide her out of the room. In the corridor, he pulled out a phone and took down her information with surprising efficiency, his massive fingers moving over the screen with practiced ease. "Mr. Vercetti doesn't usually—" Marco started, then stopped. "Just be careful with that check. And when he calls, answer. What if I don't want him to call? Marco looked at her like she'd suggested jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge. That's not how this works. He escorted her back to the main floor where Polly was waiting with an envelope of cash, her original $500. Clara pocketed it along with the check that would change everything. She left the warehouse at 4 a.m., took the subway home as the city started waking up, and walked into her apartment to find Melissa asleep on the couch. Clara sat down at this kitchen table and stared at the check. $50,000 from Adrian Versetti. Because she'd called him baby. She laughed. It started as a giggle and built into something bordering on hysterical, and she had to press her hand to her mouth to keep from waking Melissa. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was the kind of thing that got people killed or disappeared or both. But Emma needed treatment, and Claire had rent due. And law school wasn't getting any cheaper. She took a picture of the check with her phone and sent it to her bank's mobile deposit app. The deposit went through immediately. Clara watched her bank balance climb from $247.38 to $50,247.38 and felt something in her chest crack open. Relief, maybe. Or terror. Possibly both. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. But she knew who it was before she opened the message. Deposit went through quickly. Smart girl. AV. Clara stared at the screen. She should block the number, delete it, pretend this never happened. Instead, she typed back, "How did you know I'd deposit it immediately?" 3 dots appeared. Because you need the money. And because you're practical underneath all that fear. I recognize it. We're more alike than you think. We're nothing alike. We'll see. Sleep well, Clara Hayes. I'll be in touch. Clara set the phone down and looked at her reflection in the dark window. She barely recognized herself. Emma's doctor called at 8 a.m. to tell Clara the treatment had been approved and scheduled. The hospital had received an anonymous donation that covered the full cost. Clara knew it wasn't anonymous. She stood in the bathroom of Mount Sinai, staring at herself in the mirror, and understood with perfect clarity that she'd just sold something she couldn't buy back. Her phone buzzed again. "Your niece starts treatment tomorrow. You're welcome. Now you owe me." Her fingers trembled as she typed. "I don't owe you anything. You gave me that money. Nothing is free, Clara. You'll learn that. See you soon." "Everything okay?" Diane appeared in the doorway, eyes red from crying happy tears. "They said the treatment's covered. All of it. Did you?" "Yeah," Clara said softly. "I took care of it." Diane hugged her so hard Clara's ribs creaked. "Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how you did it, but thank you." Clara hugged her back and stared at her reflection over Diane's shoulder. She'd saved Emma's life. She'd also caught the attention of the most dangerous man in New York, and she had no idea which one would kill her first. The first few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and law school classes. Emma started treatment and responded well. The color came back to her cheeks. She smiled more. Diane stopped looking like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. Clara tried to focus on constitutional law and evidence and procedure, but her attention kept drifting to her phone, waiting for it to buzz. It didn't. A week passed, then 2. Clara started to relax. Maybe Versetti had forgotten about her. Maybe she'd been a momentary amusement, nothing more. Maybe she could take the money and run and pretend none of this ever happened. On the 15th day, she came home from class to find an envelope on her pillow. Thick, cream-colored paper. Expensive. Her name written in elegant script on the front. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was an invitation. "You are cordially invited to attend the Carmichael Gala. Saturday, October 15th, 8 p.m., the Plaza Hotel, formal attire required. You'll attend as my guest. Address will be delivered to your apartment tomorrow. Don't be late." AV Clara read it 3 times. Then she pulled out her phone and called the number he'd texted from. He answered on the first ring. "Clara." His voice was smooth, amused. "I was wondering when you'd call. I'm not going to some gala with you." "Yes, you are." "No," Clara said firmly. "I'm not. You paid for Emma's treatment. I'm grateful, but that doesn't mean—" "Your niece's treatment costs approximately $127,000, Versetti interrupted. "I gave you $50,000. The hospital received an anonymous donation of $200,000. Would you like to know why I overpaid? Clara's stomach dropped. Why? Insurance. Because I knew you'd try to argue that you didn't owe me anything. But you do, Clara. You owe me $150,000, and I'm calling in that debt. I'll pay you back? With what? His tone was almost gentle. Your law school salary? You'll be dead before you clear the principal. Clara sat down on her bed, legs suddenly unsteady. What do you want? I want you to attend the Carmichael Gala as my date. That's all. One evening. You wear the dress, you smile, you stand beside me, looking beautiful. Consider it a down payment. A down payment on what? We'll discuss that Saturday. She could hear the smile in his voice. The dress will arrive tomorrow at noon. It'll fit perfectly. I had you measured. You had me. When did you? I have excellent people. 8 p.m., Clara. Don't be late. He hung up. Clara stared at her phone, heart hammering. She'd been measured. He'd had someone measure her without her knowing, which meant he'd been having her followed, watched, documented. She should run. She should grab Diane and Emma and get on a bus to somewhere far away. But Emma was getting treatment. Emma was alive because of Adrian Versetti's money, and Clara was $150,000 in debt to the most dangerous man in New York. She was trapped, and the worst part was she'd walked into the trap willingly. The dress arrived exactly at noon the next day. It came in a garment bag with a designer label Clara recognized from Vogue. Inside was a gown that probably cost more than her car, midnight blue silk that shimmered when it moved, with a neckline that was elegant without being provocative, and a back that dipped just low enough to be interesting. It fit perfectly. Clara stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The dress transformed her from exhausted law student to someone who belonged at galas, who moved in Versetti's world like she'd been born to it. Shoes arrived an hour later, then jewelry, simple diamond studs and a bracelet that Clara was afraid to touch because it looked real. Her phone buzzed. You'll look beautiful. Car will pick you up at 7:30. Clara typed and deleted 5 different responses before finally settling on, "This doesn't mean I'm yours." The reply came immediately. "We'll see." No. The car that picked Clara up on Saturday was a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak. She sat in the back seat watching the city slide by and tried to remember how to breathe. The Plaza Hotel rose before her like a castle, all lights and elegance and old money. The Mercedes pulled up to the entrance where a red carpet had been laid out and cameras flashed. Clara's door opened before she could reach for the handle. Adrian Versetti stood waiting for her. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. His hair was perfectly styled, his face freshly shaved except for the carefully maintained stubble along his jaw. The scar on his cheekbone somehow made him more attractive rather than less. He extended his hand. Clara took it because what else could she do? His grip was warm, firm. He helped her out of the car with the kind of practiced grace that came from doing this 1,000 times before. "You look stunning," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "You look like you do this every week." "I do." He tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow and guided her toward the entrance. Cameras flashed around them. Clara tried not to flinch. "Smile," Versetti murmured. "You're having the time of your life." Clara smiled. It felt like baring her teeth. They swept through the lobby and into a ballroom that took Clara's breath away despite herself. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tables draped in white linen. The guest list read like a who's who of New York society, old money, new money, and the kind of money that didn't ask questions about its origins. Versetti guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, his hand never leaving the small of her back. People parted for them like water around a shark. Adrian, a woman in her 50s dripping in diamonds, air-kissed near Versetti's cheeks. "So wonderful to see you. And who is this lovely creature?" "Clara Hayes," Versetti said smoothly. "She's a law student at Columbia. Very bright." The woman's eyes sharpened with interest and calculation. "How refreshing. So many of these young girls today have nothing between their ears." Clara smiled sweetly. "I find that comment particularly ironic coming from someone wearing enough diamonds to fund a small nation's GDP, but I suppose we all have our priorities." The woman's smile froze. Versetti's hand tightened on Clara's back, whether in warning or approval she couldn't tell. If you'll excuse us, Versetti said smoothly, guiding Clara away. Once they were out of earshot, he leaned close. That was either very brave or very stupid. That was me being tired of rich people assuming I'm decoration. You are decoration tonight. My decoration. The arrangement was for you to smile and look beautiful, not antagonize society matrons. Clara stopped walking, forcing him to stop with her. Then maybe you should have hired an escort instead of blackmailing a law student. They stood in the middle of the ballroom, the crowd flowing around them, locked in a silent battle of wills. Vercetti's eyes glittered with something dangerous. You think this is blackmail? Think it's not? I think, he said softly, that you had a choice. You could have said no, could have refused the money, refused the treatment, refused all of it. But you didn't. You took what I offered because you needed it. That's not blackmail, Clara. That's just business. Business, Clara repeated, the word tasting bitter. Is that what you call buying people? I call it investment, and I always see my investments through. Before Clara could respond, a man approached, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that came from private yachts. Adrian, good to see you, and this must be the new companion I've heard so much about. Clara pasted on a smile while her mind raced. New companion. She'd been gossip before she even arrived. The silver-haired man extended his hand. Richard Carmichael. This is my gala, technically, though Adrian here practically owns the evening. Clara shook his hand. Clara Hayes, and I'm not his companion. I'm his... She trailed off, realizing she had no idea what she was. Guest, Versetti supplied smoothly. Clara is my guest. Of course. Carmichael's smile suggested he didn't believe that for a second. Well, enjoy the evening. Adrian, we should talk later about the Brooklyn situation. Later, Versetti agreed. They moved away, and Clara found herself at a table with several other couples. The conversation flowed around her. Stock portfolios, vacation homes, whose son was attending which Ivy League school. Clara stayed quiet, observing, cataloging information the way she'd been trained to in law school. Vercetti's hand found hers under the table. She tensed. His thumb traced circles on her palm, gentle, almost absent-minded. It should have been threatening. Instead, it was oddly grounding. The evening progressed. Dinner was served, courses that probably cost more than Clara's monthly grocery budget. Wine flowed. People laughed at jokes that weren't funny because the people telling them were powerful. Clara excused herself to the bathroom between courses, needing a moment to breathe. The ladies' room was all marble and gold fixtures, empty except for an attendant who handed her a towel like it was a religious ritual. She stared at herself in the mirror. The dress, the jewelry. The woman staring back looked like she belonged here. The door opened. 3 women walked in, already mid-conversation. Can't believe Adrian brought her. Did you see her dress? Probably costs more than her entire wardrobe. She's pretty enough, I suppose. If you like that girl next door look, please. She's a placeholder. Adrian always has a type on his arm for these things. They never last more than a season. Clara stayed very still in her stall, not even breathing. I heard she's a law student. Can you imagine? Adrian Versetti with a law student. That's practically asking for a RICO investigation. Laughter echoed off of the marble. Give it 6 months. He'll be bored and she'll be yesterday's news. That's how it always goes. The women left. Clara emerged from the stall slowly, meeting the attendant's eyes in the mirror. The woman's expression was sympathetic. First time at one of these? The attendant asked softly. That obvious? Honey, you gotta look like a deer in headlights, but you're doing better than most. Half the women here would kill for Adrian Versetti's attention, and the other half would kill to avoid it. She handed Clara another towel. Advice? These people will chew you up and spit you out. Don't let them. Clara returned to the ballroom with her spine a little straighter, her smile a little sharper. Versetti stood when she approached the table. Everything all right? Fine. Just needed air. His eyes studied her face like he could read the conversation she'd overheard. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. The band was playing something slow and intimate. Versetti guided her onto the dance floor, one hand settling at her waist, the other taking her hand. They moved together, and Clara realized with some surprise that he was an excellent dancer. You're tense, he observed. I'm at a gala with a crime boss who blackmailed me into attending. tense seems appropriate. I prefer entrepreneurial businessman. I prefer honest. He smiled. Then let's be honest. You hate this. You hate me. You hate every second of being here. Yes. And yet you came. You wore the dress. You've played your part perfectly. Because I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Clara. He spun her gently, bringing her back against his chest. You just didn't like your other options. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. A group of men entered the ballroom, young, expensive suits, but something about them was wrong. Too aggressive. Too sharp. They moved like predators in unfamiliar territory. Versetti's entire demeanor changed. His hand on Clara's waist became possessive, protective. His eyes went cold. Russians, he murmured. The lead man was tall and blond, with a face like a Nordic prince and eyes like winter. He scanned the room until his gaze landed on Versetti. A smile spread across his face. Not friendly. He walked toward them, his crew following like wolves. Adrian Versetti, the man said in accented English, how generous of you to host such a beautiful evening. Dmitri, Versetti's voice was flat. This is Carmichael's gala, not mine. You weren't on the guest list. Guest lists are so restrictive. Dmitri's eyes slid to Clara. And who is this beautiful creature? Versetti's hand tightened on Clara's waist. None of your concern. Come now, Adrian, we're all friends here. Dmitri extended his hand to Clara. Dmitri Sokolov. And you are? Clara looked at the extended hand like it was a snake. She's with me, Versetti said quietly. That's all you need to know. The temperature in this room dropped 10 degrees. Around them, people were backing away, creating a circle. Marco and two other men appeared at Versetti's shoulder. Dmitri's smile widened. So protective, she must be special. Dmitri. A warning. I'm just being friendly, Adrian. You know how we Russians are, we like to share. The threat was barely concealed. Versetti moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. 1 second he was standing beside her. The next he was in Dmitri's space, his hand on the Russian's chest. Touch her, Versetti said softly, and I'll feed you your own teeth. The Russians reached for their weapons. So did Marco and his crew. The ballroom transformed into a powder keg waiting for a match. Clara did something incredibly stupid. She stepped between them. Gentlemen, she said loudly, her voice cutting through the tension, I'm sure we can all act like civilized adults for one evening. Every eye in the room locked onto her. Versetti grabbed her arm. Clara, Mr. Sokolov, Clara continued, ignoring Versetti's grip. You're right that I'm special, but not because Mr. Versetti claims to own me. I'm special because I'm one of the few people in this room who actually worked for everything she has instead of inheriting it or stealing it. Dmitri's eyebrows rose. I'm a law student, Clara continued, which means I'm trained to read people, to understand power dynamics, and to know when someone is compensating for something. Her gaze dropped meaningfully to Dmitri's crotch, then back up. You crashed this party to make a point. Point made. Now either sit down and enjoy the champagne like a civilized human being, or leave, because this pissing contest is boring everyone. The silence was absolute. Then Dmitri started laughing. It was genuine, surprised laughter that echoed through the ballroom. He looked at Versetti with something approaching respect. She is special, Dmitri said. Where did you find her? Serving drinks, Versetti said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. Well, Dmitri stepped back, his hands spread in mock surrender. I can take a hint when it's delivered with such eloquence. He turned to leave, then paused. Adrian, we still need to talk. About Brooklyn. Later. Dmitri and his crew left. The tension bled out of the room. Conversations resumed. The band started playing again. Versetti pulled Clara onto the balcony, away from the crowd. The city sprawled below them, all lights and darkness. That, he said quietly, was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. I was trying to prevent a shootout. You should have stayed out of it. And let you start a war in the middle of a charity gala? No thanks. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, Clara corrected. But I'm more terrified of becoming collateral damage in whatever pissing contest you have going with the Russians. That pissing contest is about territory worth $10 million. Then maybe fight about it somewhere that isn't surrounded by civilians. Verchetti moved closer, backing her against the balcony railing. You humiliated Dmitry Sokolov in front of 24 witnesses. Do you understand what that means? That I have a big mouth and poor survival instincts? It means you just painted a target on your back. The Russians don't forget insults, especially not from women. Clara's bravado cracked slightly. I was trying to help. I know. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. But help has consequences in my world. Your world is insane. Yes. His thumb traced her lower lip. And you just stepped into it willingly. Again. Clara's breath caught. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the heat radiating off his body. I didn't, she started. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming, possessive, the kind of kiss that said mine in every language. His hand tangled in her hair, destroying her careful updo. His other hand pressed against the small of her back, pulling her against him. Clara should have pushed him away, should have slapped him, should have done anything except kiss him back. But she did. Her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, and she kissed him like she was drowning and he was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Verchetti rested his forehead against hers. 6 months, he said quietly. What? Pretend to be mine for 6 months. Public appearances, events like this. You wear my ring, you smile for the cameras, you stand beside me. Clara's mind raced. Why? Because the Russians respect commitment. They respect family. A fiancé is a statement. It says I'm settling down, becoming legitimate. It makes me look less like a target. Use someone else. I don't want someone else. His eyes locked onto hers. I want you. The girl brave enough to call me baby. Stupid enough to step between me and Dmitry Sokolov. Smart enough to see through the bullshit. I'm not... 6 months, he repeated. I'll pay off your law school debt, your sister's mortgage, Emma's medical bills for the next 5 years. You'll want for nothing. Clara's head spun. What happens after 6 months? After 6 months, you walk away. Free and clear. No strings, no debt. You go back to your life, and I go back to mine. It was too good to be true, which meant there was a catch. What's the catch? Clara asked. Verchetti smiled. The catch is that you might not want to leave. I'll want to leave. We'll see. He pulled a box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a ring, platinum band with a diamond so large it could have its own zip code. This is insane, Clara whispered. Yes, I should say no. You should, but you won't, because you're practical, Clara Hayes, and this is the most practical solution to all your problems. He was right, and Clara hated him for it. She held out her hand. Verchetti slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. He'd measured her. He'd planned this. 6 months, Clara said firmly. Then I'm gone. 6 months, Verchetti agreed, but his smile said he knew something she didn't. And as they returned to the ballroom, Clara's hand in his, the ring catching the light, she wondered what she'd just agreed to, what she'd just become, and whether she'd survive long enough to find out. The photograph hit the front page of the New York Post the next morning. Clara saw it while grabbing coffee before her constitutional law seminar. Her and Adrian on the balcony at the plaza. His hand on her face, the moment before the kiss. The headline read, Vercetti's New Queen. Crime boss gets engaged to Columbia law student. Clara bought 3 copies. Not because she wanted them, but because she needed to see if it was real. If she'd actually done what she thought she'd done. The ring on her finger confirmed it. Her phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. Diane. Melissa. Numbers she didn't recognize. She'd turned it off after the 15th call and tried to pretend the world hadn't just imploded. Professor Morrison was mid-lecture on the Commerce Clause when Clara's turned-off phone somehow buzzed anyway. She pulled it out, confused, and found a single text message that had bypassed her settings. We need to talk. Car outside. Don't make a scene. Avi. Clara looked towards the lecture hall windows. Sure enough, the black Mercedes sat at the curb like a predator waiting for prey. She grabbed her bag and stood. "Ms. Hayes?" Professor Morrison paused mid-sentence. "Is there a problem?" Every head in the lecture hall turned toward her. Clara could feel their stares, their recognition. She was the girl from the Post, the one who'd gotten engaged to Adrian Versetti. "Family emergency," Clara said, which wasn't technically a lie. Her entire life had become an emergency. She walked out before Morrison could respond, down the stairs, across the quad, to where Marco stood beside the Mercedes looking like a particularly well-dressed tank. "He's inside," Marco said, opening the rear door. Adrian sat in the back seat wearing a different suit than last night. Charcoal gray, three-piece, perfectly tailored. He looked like he'd slept 8 hours and woken up refreshed. Claire had gotten maybe 3 hours and felt like roadkill. "Get in," Adrian said. Claire got in. The door closed behind her with the solid thunk of German engineering. "You hijacked my phone," she said. "I have excellent people." He handed her a coffee. 2 sugars, splash of cream. That's how you take it, right? Claire stared at the coffee cup like it might contain poison. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" "I know everything about you, Clara. Your class schedule. Your favorite study spot in the library. The fact that you eat ramen 4 nights a week because you're too tired to cook. The way you bite your thumbnail when you're anxious." His gaze dropped to her hand where she was indeed biting her thumbnail. "You're predictable. You're a stalker. I'm thorough." He gestured to the coffee. "Drink. You look like you need it." Clara took the coffee because spite only went so far when you were running on 3 hours of sleep. It was perfect, exactly how she liked it, and that made her hate him a little more. "The Post," she said. "Saw it. Excellent photo. The photographer caught your good side." "This isn't funny." "I didn't say it was funny. I said it was excellent. There's a difference." Adrian pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. "We're trending on Twitter, Instagram. TMZ picked it up. People magazine wants an exclusive interview." Clara's stomach lurched. "People magazine? They're offering 6 figures. I declined." "You declined 6 figures. I don't need the money. And you're not ready for that kind of exposure yet." He pocketed his phone. "Your sister called me 17 times this morning. I answered on the 18th. She's concerned." "What did you tell her?" "That you're fine, that we're engaged, that she should stop reading tabloids." He paused. "She called me a bastard. I like her." "She's right. You are a bastard." "Yes, but I'm a bastard who just cleared your student loans. Check your email." Clara pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Sure enough, there was an email from Columbia's financial aid office. Her student loan balance, $0. She looked up at Adrian, her throat tight. "That was $70,000. $73,426, he corrected. "I rounded up and paid off Diane's mortgage, too. She owns her house free and clear now." Clara couldn't breathe. "Why?" "Because we're engaged, and I take care of what's mine. I'm not yours. The ring on your finger says otherwise." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Here's how this works. You are now Clara Hayes, fiancée of Adrian Versetti. That means you live by my rules. You don't go anywhere without Marco or someone from my security team. You don't talk to reporters without my approval. You attend events when I need you to attend them. You smile, you play the part, and you don't embarrass me. And if I say no, you won't." His voice was soft, certain. "Because Emma starts her 2nd round of treatment next week, and the hospital needs confirmation that the funding is still in place. 1 phone call from me, and that funding disappears." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "You're threatening a 7-year-old with cancer." "I'm stating facts. You agreed to 6 months. I'm holding you to it." "I didn't agree to be your prisoner." "No, you agreed to be my fiancée. There's a difference." He sat back, his expression unreadable. "You have class in 20 minutes. Marco will drive you. After class, you have an appointment at Bergdorf Goodman. They're expecting you at 2. "For what?" "Wardrobe. You can't wear Target to the events you'll be attending." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Non-negotiable. You're a reflection of me now. Act accordingly." The car stopped in front of the law school. Marco opened Clara's door. She turned back to Adrian, her voice shaking with fury. "I hate you." "I know." He smiled. "See you tonight. Dinner at 8. Wear something nice." Clara slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the windows and stalked back into the building. Behind her, she heard Adrian laugh. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and pointed stares. Everyone had seen the post. Everyone had opinions. Clara kept her head down, took notes she'd never remember, and tried to pretend her life wasn't spiraling out of control. At 2 p.m., Marco drove her to Bergdorf Goodman, where a personal shopper named Isabel was waiting with champagne and an expression that suggested she'd dressed royalty. "Ms. Hayes," Isabel air-kissed near Clara's cheeks. "Mr. Versetti told me so much about you. This is going to be such fun." It was not fun. It was 3 hours of being poked, prodded, measured, and dressed like a doll while Isabel and her assistant cooed over fabric and cut and how this Valentino really brought out Clara's eyes. By the time they finished, Clara had acquired an entire wardrobe that probably cost more than most people's cars. Designer dresses, tailored suits, shoes that hurt just looking at them, and enough lingerie to stock a small boutique. "Mr. Vercetti has exquisite taste," Isabel said as she packed everything into garment bags. "He selected most of these himself." Clara felt her skin crawl. "He selected my underwear?" "He selected everything. He's very particular about presentation." Marco drove Clara home with the trunk full of bags and boxes. Melissa was waiting in the apartment, practically vibrating with questions. "Oh my God," Melissa said the moment Clara walked through the door. "Oh my God, you're engaged to Adrian Versetti. Adrian Vercetti. The Adrian Versetti." "I'm aware." "How? When? Why didn't you tell me? The post says you met at a private event. Was that the gig I got you? Did you? Oh my God, did you sleep with him?" "No!" Clara dropped the bags and collapsed onto the couch. "It's complicated. Complicated like we're in love, complicated, or complicated like he's blackmailing you, complicated." Clara looked at her roommate and felt something crack. "Both. Neither. I don't know." She told Melissa everything: the warehouse, the $50,000, Emma's treatment, the gala, Dmitry Sokolov, the ring, the 6-month deal. All of it spilled out in a rush of words that left her feeling hollow. Melissa listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to horror to something that might have been admiration. "So you're fake engaged to a crime boss to pay for your niece's cancer treatment," Melissa said slowly, "and he paid off your student loans and your sister's mortgage." "Yes." "And you have to pretend to be his fiancée for 6 months." "Yes." "And then you walk away. That's the plan." Melissa was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Clara, you know you're not going to walk away, right?" "What?" "Men like Adrian Versetti don't let go of things they want. And based on that photo in the post, he wants you. It's just business." That kiss didn't look like business. Clara touched her lips, remembering. "It was for show. Keep telling yourself that." Melissa stood and grabbed one of the Bergdorf bags. "Now show me this obscenely expensive wardrobe so I can live vicariously through your probably doomed romance with a mobster." At 7:30, Clara stood in front of her mirror wearing a black dress that cost more than her first car. It was simple, elegant, the kind of dress that whispered wealth instead of screaming it. Her hair was down, loose waves that Isabel had insisted suited her face shape. The diamond ring caught the light every time she moved. She looked like someone else, someone who belonged in Adrian Versetti's world. The thought terrified her. Marco picked her up at 7:45. The drive took them through Manhattan, into a neighborhood where the buildings cost 8 figures and had doormen who looked like they could kill you with their pinkies. The restaurant was small, exclusive, the kind of place that didn't have a sign because if you needed a sign, you didn't belong there. The maitre d' recognized Marco immediately and led them to a private room in the back. Adrian was already there, seated at a table set for 2. He stood when Clara entered, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin prickle. "Beautiful," he said simply. "The dress cost $8,000. It should be beautiful." "I wasn't talking about the dress." Clara sat before her legs could betray how much that comment affected her. A waiter appeared with wine, something red and probably older than Clara, and disappeared again without speaking. "So," Clara said, taking a fortifying sip, "dinner. Is this where you give me my marching orders for the next 6 months?" "This is where we get to know each other." Adrian swirled his wine. "If we're going to convince people we're engaged, you need to know more about me than what you've read in the tabloids. I know you're a criminal. I'm a businessman with diversified interests, some of which operate in legally gray areas. That's a fancy way of saying you're a criminal. He smiled. I like that you don't pretend. Most people spend the first month trying to convince me they don't know what I do. Most people are smarter than me, or more afraid. He set down his wine. Ask me anything. 3 questions. I'll answer honestly. Clara considered. Why me? That's a broad question. You have access to any woman in New York. Models, actresses, socialites who actually know how to navigate your world. Why pick a law student who called you baby by accident? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the table. Because everyone else would say yes for the wrong reasons. The money, the power, the status. You said yes because you had no choice. That makes you honest, and I value honesty. That's a terrible reason to fake propose to someone. Maybe, but it's my reason. He leaned forward. Next question. What happens if I fail, if I can't play this part convincingly enough? You won't fail. But if I do, his eyes darkened. Then we renegotiate. But Clara, you won't fail. You stood up to Dmitry Sokolov in a room full of armed men. You can handle charity galas and society luncheons. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Last question. Clara took another drink, liquid courage. Do you actually kill people? Or is that just tabloid gossip? The silence stretched. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something cold and ancient and utterly merciless. Yes, he said quietly. When necessary. When they've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. When mercy would be seen as weakness. He paused. Does that frighten you? Yes? Good. You should be frightened. Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive. He sat back. My turn. 3 questions. That wasn't the deal. It is now. First question. Why law school? Clara hadn't expected that. Because the world isn't fair, and I wanted to learn how to fight back. Against what? Everything. The system that let my parents die because their insurance wouldn't cover the treatment they needed. The banks that tried to foreclose on Diane's house when she missed one payment because Emma was sick. The way people with money get justice and people without money get screwed. She met his gaze. I wanted to be the person who levels the playing field. Adrian smiled, genuine and warm. You're an idealist. You say that like it's a bad thing. In my world, idealism gets you killed. But I respect the impulse. He took a drink. Second question. What do you want? Not what you need, not what you're fighting for. What do you want for yourself? No one had ever asked Clara that before. She'd spent so long focused on survival, hers, Diane's, Emma's, that wanting felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. I don't know, she admitted. Think about it. You have 6 months. His gaze pinned her. Last question. Do you trust me? No. Smart girl. He raised his glass. To 6 months of mutually beneficial dishonesty. Clara clinked her glass against his, and they drank to the lie they were building together. Dinner arrived. Courses that Clara couldn't identify, but that tasted expensive. They ate and talked, and Clara found herself forgetting for stretches of time that she was dining with one of the most dangerous men in New York. Adrian was surprisingly easy to talk to when he wasn't being terrifying. He was well-read, opinionated, funny in a dark way that made Clara laugh despite herself. Tell me about Emma, Adrian said over dessert. Clara's defenses went up immediately. Why? Because she's important to you. And I should know about the people who matter to my fiancé. The word fiancé still felt foreign. She's 7. She likes dinosaurs and Harry Potter and drives Diane crazy by refusing to eat anything green. Clara smiled despite herself. She asked me last week if you were a superhero or a villain. What did you say? I said I was still figuring that out. And what's your current assessment? Clara looked at him, really looked, at the expensive suit and the scar and the eyes that had seen too much. I think you're both, and neither. I think you're just a person who's made choices I'll never understand. That's probably the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. Dessert finished. Coffee appeared. The evening was winding down, and Clara felt the strangest sense of disappointment. I need to prepare you for tomorrow, Adrian said, his tone shifting to business. There's a charity luncheon at the Met. Women's thing, cancer research. You'll attend with Diane. Clara blinked. Diane? I thought it would be good for you to have backup, and it'll look good. The devoted sister and future sister-in-law supporting cancer research together. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. 2 tickets. Diane's already confirmed. Car will pick you both up at 11. You invited my sister without asking me? I called her after you left this morning. She was surprisingly enthusiastic once I explained you'd be surrounded by society women who'd eat you alive without backup. He wasn't wrong. What else haven't you told me? There's an interview next week, Vanity Fair. They want the story of how we met. You said no interviews. I said no People magazine. Vanity Fair is different, more respectable, and the writer owes me a favor. She'll make us look good. How does a Vanity Fair writer owe you a favor? Adrian smiled. I helped her brother avoid a very unfortunate legal situation. She's been grateful ever since. You mean you blackmailed her? I mean she's motivated to write a flattering piece. There's a difference. Clara rubbed her temples. This is insane. This is your life now. For the next 6 months, anyway. He signaled for the check. Marco will take you home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be exhausting. The drive back to Washington Heights felt longer than it should have. Clara stared out the window, watching the city slide by, and tried to process everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Adrian told me about the luncheon. Are you okay? Clara typed back. Define okay. Are you safe? Is he treating you well? Clara looked at the ring on her finger. The designer dress. The paid-off mortgage and student loans and medical bills. I'm safe. He's complicated. That's not an answer. It's the best one I have right now. See you tomorrow. Love you. She sent the text and closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The luncheon at the Met was exactly as awful as Clara had anticipated. 200 society women in designer dresses, picking at salads and drinking champagne while discussing their charity work in voices that suggested they'd never actually met anyone who needed charity. Diane looked uncomfortable in the dress Clara had lent her. One of the Bergdorf purchases that was nice, but not too nice. She gripped Clara's arm like a lifeline as they navigated tables filled with women whose jewelry could fund small countries. I hate this, Diane whispered. Join the club. They found their assigned table. The nameplate read, Ms. Clara Hayes and guest, courtesy of Mr. Adrian Versetti. The other women at the table looked up with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. You're her, one of them said, blonde, 40-ish, with the kind of face that came from excellent surgery. Adrian's new fiancée. Clara Hayes. Clara extended her hand. The woman looked at it like Clara was offering a dead fish. Jennifer Westbrook. My husband owns Westbrook Industries. How long have you known Adrian? It was a trap question. Clara recognized it from law school, the kind designed to expose weakness. Long enough, Clara said smoothly. How romantic. A whirlwind engagement. Jennifer's smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I suppose when you're a law student struggling to make ends meet, a man like Adrian must seem like a fairy tale. Diane tensed beside her. Clara put a hand on her sister's arm. Actually, Clara said, matching Jennifer's fake smile with one of her own, when you're a law student, you learn to recognize conditional kindness, the kind where people are only nice to you when they want something or think you can help them. Adrian's many things, but at least he's honest about his motives. Can you say the same? Jennifer's smile froze. The other women at the table suddenly found their salads fascinating. Well, Jennifer said tightly, I can see why Adrian finds you amusing. The luncheon dragged on, speeches about cancer research that felt hollow coming from women who'd never sat in a hospital waiting room praying for miracles. Diane gripped Clara's hand under the table during the particularly patronizing ones. After the third speech, a woman approached their table. She was older, 60 or 70, with white hair and kind eyes, and an air of authority that made everyone sit up straighter. Clara Hayes, the woman said. I'm Catherine Rothman. Might I borrow you for a moment? It wasn't really a question. Clara followed Catherine to a quiet corner, Diane trailing behind protectively. You're making waves, Catherine said without preamble. I'm just trying to survive. No, you're challenging the hierarchy. Jennifer Westbrook has ruled this particular social circle for 15 years. You just took her down in front of her peers. Catherine smiled. I approve. Clara blinked. You approve? I've known Adrian since he was a boy. His mother was a dear friend before she passed. He's always been singular in his choices. She studied Clara with sharp eyes. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more polished, more obviously ambitious, more willing to play the game. Catherine paused. But you're genuine. That's rare in this world. Don't lose it. I'll try. Good. Now, a warning. Jennifer will retaliate. Women like her always do. Watch your back at social events. She'll try to humiliate you, probably in front of as many witnesses as possible. Thanks for the heads up. And Clara? Catherine's expression softened. If you ever need an ally in this circus, call me. Adrian has my number. She walked away, leaving Clara feeling like she'd just been assessed and somehow passed a test she didn't know she was taking. The luncheon finally ended. Clara and Diane escaped to the Mercedes, where Marco was waiting. That was horrible, Diane said once they were safely inside. That was Tuesday, apparently. Diane was quiet for a moment, then, Are you sure about this? About Adrian? About all of it? Clara looked at her sister, really looked. Diane had dark circles under her eyes from sleeping at the hospital. Her clothes were nice, but worn. She'd given up everything for Emma, and it still wasn't enough. Emma's getting treatment, Clara said. Your mortgage is paid. My student loans are gone. Yes, I'm sure. But are you happy? Clara didn't have an answer for that. Her phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. How was the luncheon? Survived, barely. I heard you put Jennifer Westbrook in her place. Well done. You have spies everywhere, don't you? I prefer well-informed. Dinner tonight? I have something to show you. Clara should have said no, should have demanded a break, some space to breathe. Instead, she typed, What time? 7. Wear comfortable shoes. Comfortable shoes turned out to be necessary because Adrian didn't take her to a restaurant. He took her to a building in Tribeca that looked abandoned from the outside but was clearly being renovated inside. What is this? Clara asked as Marco opened the car door. Come see. Adrian led her through a construction zone. Plastic sheeting, exposed brick, the smell of fresh paint. They climbed stairs to the top floor, where he unlocked a door and gestured for her to enter. Clara stepped inside and stopped. The penthouse was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, open floor plan, exposed beams and brick walls. It was still under construction, but Clara could see what it would become. Beautiful, stunning, home. It's mine, Adrian said, or it will be. Construction finishes in 3 weeks. It's incredible. I'm glad you think so. Because you're moving in. Clara turned to face him. Excuse me? We're engaged. Engaged couples live together. It'll look suspicious if you're still in Washington Heights while I'm here. You can't just decide I'm moving in with you. I can, and I did. You'll have your own room, your own space. Think of it as an upgrade from your current situation. My current situation is my life. Your current situation is a shoebox apartment with 2 roommates and plumbing that sounds like it's actively dying. He moved closer. Here. You'll have privacy, security, a study for your law books, everything you need. Everything except freedom. You haven't had freedom since the moment you called me baby, Clara. This is just making the situation more logistically sound. He was right, and Clara hated him for it. When? She asked. This weekend. Marco will handle the move. I don't get a say in this? You can say no, and I can call the hospital and tell them the funding for Emma's treatment has been withdrawn pending review. Clara's hands clenched into fists. You're a bastard. So I've been told. Repeatedly. He walked to the windows, looking out at the city. 6 months, Clara. Give me 6 months of your life, and I'll give you freedom from debt, worry, and every financial burden you've carried since your parents died. It's a fair trade. There's nothing fair about this. No, he agreed. But it's what we have. Clara joined him at the window. The city sprawled below them, all lights and possibilities and dangers lurking in shadows. What if I can't do this? She asked quietly. What if I'm not strong enough? You step between me and Dmitry Sokolov with nothing but words and audacity. You're stronger than you think. He turned to face her. And you're not alone. I won't let anything happen to you. Why do you care? Because you're mine now, and I protect what's mine. There was that word again. Mine. Possessive, claiming, Absolute. Clara should have run, should have fought harder, should have found some way out of this gilded cage. Instead, she looked at Adrian Vercetti, this dangerous, complicated, impossible man, and wondered when she'd stopped being entirely sure she wanted to escape. The week passed in a blur of activity. Clara attended classes, studied for midterms, and tried to pretend her life was normal. Marco drove her everywhere. Security cameras tracked her movements. Adrian's people were always watching, always present, always there. On Thursday, Melissa helped Clara pack her belongings. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of law books, a laptop, and the framed photo of her parents that she'd kept since college. "This is surreal," Melissa said, taping up a box. "You're moving in with Adrian Vercetti." "Into my own room, in a penthouse I'll never be able to afford on my own, while pretending to be engaged to a man who terrifies me." Clara sat on her bed. "My life is a Lifetime movie. More like a crime thriller with romantic elements." "There are no romantic elements." Melissa gave her a look. "You kissed him." "He kissed me. For show." Keep telling yourself that. Friday evening, Marco and 2 other men collected Clara's belongings and transported them to Tribeca. Clara followed in the Mercedes, watching Washington Heights disappear behind her like a life she used to know. The penthouse was finished. The construction equipment was gone, replaced by furniture that probably cost more than Clara's law degree. Her room was at the opposite end from Adrian's, a massive space with a king bed, walk-in closet, and bathroom that had heated floors and a shower with enough jets to qualify as a spa. Her boxes looked pathetic in the middle of all that space. "Welcome home," Adrian said from the doorway. "This isn't home. This is witness protection with better furniture. Give it time." He handed her a key. "Front door. Come and go as you please. Just take Marco or one of the security team with you." "So I'm not a prisoner, I'm just constantly supervised." "You're protected. There's a difference." He paused. "Dinner's in 20 minutes. I'll be in the kitchen." He cooked. That was the first surprise. Clara found him in the massive kitchen, wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of his usual suit, making what smelled like Italian food. "You cook," Clara said. "My mother taught me." She believed men who couldn't feed themselves were helpless children. He stirred something on the stove. "Sit. This'll be ready soon." Clara sat at the island and watched him work. It was strange seeing Adrian Vercetti, feared crime boss, ruthless businessman, man who allegedly fed his enemies to pigs, making pasta from scratch with the focused intensity of someone who cared about getting it right. "Why are you staring?" he asked without looking up. "You're just different than I expected." "I'm a person, Clara, not a character from The Godfather. I have hobbies, preferences, a life beyond what you read in the Post." "What else do you do besides cook and run a criminal empire?" "I read. Mostly history and philosophy. I play chess badly. I collect first editions, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, the classics." He plated the pasta with precision. "I donate to charities anonymously because I like the idea of doing good without credit. And I haven't killed anyone personally in 3 years, though I've ordered deaths. Does that help humanize me?" "Not really, but it's honest." They ate together at the dining table and it felt oddly normal. Domestic even, like they were actually a couple instead of 2 people locked in a mutually beneficial arrangement. "The Vanity Fair interview is Monday," Adrian said. "They'll ask how we met. We need to get our story straight." "What's the official version?" "Close to the truth. You were working an event. I noticed you. We talked. I was intrigued. I pursued you. You resisted at first because you thought I was too intense. True. But eventually I wore you down with charm and persistence." "You mean money and coercion?" "The public doesn't need those details." He took a drink of wine. "They'll ask about the engagement, when I proposed, what I said, how you reacted. I need you to look happy when you talk about it." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it. These people are professional skeptics. They'll see through hesitation." He reached across the table and took her hand. "When you talk about me, about us, you need to believe it, even if it's just for the length of the interview." Clara looked at their joined hands. His grip was warm, steady, completely at odds with everything she knew about him. "I'll do my best," she said. "That's all I ask." The weekend passed quietly. Clara unpacked her belongings, studied for midterms, and tried to adjust to living in a penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. Adrian gave her space, appearing only for meals and brief conversations that felt like negotiations between opposing counsel. Sunday night, Clara couldn't sleep. She wandered through the penthouse at 2 a.m. and found Adrian on the balcony, smoking a cigar and staring at the city. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning around. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "Don't be. You'll be fine." Clara joined him at the railing. The city stretched out below them, infinite and indifferent. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it, the life you chose?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. "Every day. And never. Both at once." He took a drag from the cigar. "I was 18 when my father was killed. He left me an empire built on blood and fear and ruthlessness. I could have walked away, sold everything, gone legitimate, but I didn't." "Why not?" "Because walking away would have meant his death was meaningless. And because I was good at it. The violence, the strategy, the chess game of power." He looked at her. "We all make choices, Clara. Mine led here. Yours led to me. Neither of us can change that now. I could leave. After 6 months. You could. But you won't." "You sound very certain." "I am." He stubbed out the cigar. "Because somewhere between hating me and learning to survive in my world, you're going to realize you fit here better than you ever did in yours, and that's going to terrify you more than anything I could ever do to you." Clara wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but standing on the balcony at 2 a.m., wearing expensive pajamas in a penthouse she'd never dreamed of inhabiting, engaged to a man who'd paid off her debts with pocket change, she couldn't find the words. Because maybe he was right, and maybe that scared her more than anything. The Vanity Fair journalist arrived at 11 on Monday morning, exactly on time, with a photographer and an assistant who set up lighting in the penthouse living room like they were staging a crime scene. Clara watched from the kitchen, her coffee growing cold in her hands, while Adrian charmed them all with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Ms. Hayes." The journalist extended her hand. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "Rebecca Chen, thanks for agreeing to this." "I didn't exactly agree," Clara said before she could stop herself. Rebecca's smile became genuine. "Honest, I like that." She gestured to the couch. "Shall we?" The interview started with softballs, where Clara grew up, her parents, law school. Rebecca was good at her job, asking questions that felt conversational while slowly building toward the real story. Clara could see the trap forming, question by question, and couldn't quite figure out how to avoid it. "So," Rebecca said, her recorder running on the coffee table between them. "Tell me how you met Adrian." Clara glanced at Adrian, who sat beside her with his hand resting casually on her knee. His thumb traced small circles on her leg, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a warning. "I was working a catering event," Clara said, sticking to the script. "Private party. I didn't know it was his party. I was just trying to make rent and pay for my niece's medical treatment. And Adrian noticed you. I was hard to miss. I nearly dropped a tray of glasses on him." Rebecca laughed. Love at first crash? More like intrigue at first disaster. Clara felt Adrian's hand tighten slightly. "He was different than I expected. Less intimidating. More human." Adrian Versetti, human. That's not a headline you see often. Adrian spoke for the first time. "I'd like to think I'm human most of the time." "Most of the time," Rebecca repeated, her pen moving across her notepad. "What about the other times?" "The other times I'm a businessman dealing with complicated situations. But we're not here to talk about business. We're here to talk about Clara." It was a smooth redirect, but Rebecca wasn't deterred. "Fair enough. Clara, what was it about Adrian that made you say yes when he asked you out?" Clara remembered the warehouse, the check, the hospital bill, the way Adrian had looked at her like she was a particularly interesting puzzle to solve. "He saw me," Clara said quietly. "Not the law student, not the struggling niece, not the girl wearing Target clothes to a high-end event, just me. That's rare." It was the truth, which made it easier to sell. And judging by the way Rebecca's expression softened, it was working. The interview continued. Rebecca asked about the proposal. Adrian spun a story about a private dinner at the penthouse construction site, champagne and city lights, and a speech about wanting to build something permanent. Clara added details about being surprised, overwhelmed, unsure, but ultimately convinced by his sincerity. They were both lying, and they were both so good at it that Clara almost believed the story herself. The photographer posed them, Adrian's arm around Clara's waist, her hand on his chest showing the ring, both of them laughing at something the photographer said that wasn't actually funny. Clara caught her reflection in the window behind the photographer and barely recognized herself. She looked happy, in love, exactly like a woman who'd said yes to Adrian Versetti for all the right reasons. The performance exhausted her more than any law school exam ever had. Rebecca left at 2, promising the piece would run in the next issue with a cover shoot if they were interested. Adrian declined politely, and Clara caught the flicker of relief on Rebecca's face, like she'd expected him to say yes and was glad he hadn't. The moment the door closed, Clara collapsed on the couch. "I need a drink," she said. "It's 2 in the afternoon. I just spent 3 hours lying about being in love with you. I think that qualifies as a drinking emergency." Adrian poured them both scotch, expensive, smooth, the kind that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent used to. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You did well," he said. "I'm a terrible liar." "No, you're an excellent liar. You just don't like it." He took a drink. "That story you told about me seeing you, was that true?" Clara looked at him, surprised by the question. "Which part?" "The part about me seeing you, not the law student or the struggling niece, just you." Clara thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe. You certainly saw enough to know I could be useful." "Useful," Adrian repeated, his tone unreadable. "Is that what you think this is? Isn't it?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When I saw you at that warehouse, carrying that tray like you were marching into battle, I thought you were the most alive person in a room full of corpses. Everyone else was playing a role, the enforcer, the accountant, the made man, but you were just trying to survive. That's what I saw. Someone fighting." Clara's chest tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this real. Make me think you actually care instead of just—" She gestured vaguely between them. "Whatever this is? What if it's both?" Adrian set down his glass. "What if I brought you into this because you were useful and stayed interested because you're more than that? Then you're lying to yourself as much as you're lying to everyone else." His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. "Am I?" Clara should have pulled away, should have maintained distance, kept boundaries, remembered this was business. Instead, she let him tilt her face toward his, let him study her like she was something precious instead of purchased. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Probably." He kissed her anyway. It was different from the kiss at the plaza. Slower, deeper, less about performance and more about something Clara didn't have words for. His hand tangled in her hair, and she found herself gripping his shirt, pulling him closer, losing herself in the taste of scotch and the warmth of his mouth. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Still think this is just business?" he asked. Clara's phone rang before she could answer. Diane's number flashing on the screen felt like a lifeline and an interruption she resented in equal measure. She pulled away, grabbing the phone. "Hey!" "Turn on the news." Diane's voice was tight with fear. "Channel 7, now." Clara found the remote, switching on the massive TV mounted above the fireplace. Adrian moved beside her, his expression shifting from intimate to alert in the span of a heartbeat. The news showed a warehouse, not the one where Clara had worked, but similar. Police tape, body bags, a reporter speaking urgently into a camera about a massacre in Brooklyn. 5 dead in what authorities are calling a targeted hit. Sources close to the investigation say this appears to be related to ongoing territorial disputes between organized crime families. Among the dead is Dmitry Sokolov, alleged leader of the Russian— Clara's breath stopped. Dmitry Sokolov, the man from the gala. The man she'd humiliated with words while Adrian watched. Adrian's face was carved from stone. "Did you—" Clara started. "No." His voice was flat. "But someone wants it to look like I did." The news continued. Details about the shooting, professional, execution style, no witnesses. The police were investigating connections to Adrian Versetti, though no charges had been filed. Clara's phone rang again. Unknown number. "Don't answer that," Adrian said. She answered anyway. "Hello?" Heavy breathing. Then a voice, accented and cold. "Tell your fiancé he made a mistake. Tell him the Bratva doesn't forgive. Tell him we're coming." The line went dead. Clara's hand shook as she lowered the phone. "They think you killed Dmitri." "Of course they do. It's what I would think." Adrian pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. "Marco, Luca, office. Now." "What's happening?" "War." He looked at her, and for the first time Clara saw something like regret in his eyes. "I need you to pack a bag. You're leaving." "What?" "No. This isn't a discussion. If the Russians think I killed Dmitri, did you?" "No, but that won't matter to them. They'll come after everyone connected to me. That includes you." He gripped her shoulders. "Pack. Now. Marco will take you somewhere safe." "I'm not running." "Clara, no." She pulled free of his grip. "You said I was yours. You said you protect what's yours." "Well, I'm not going anywhere. If there's a war coming, I'm staying." This isn't some legal debate you can win with good arguments. These are people who kill for a living. "Then teach me how to survive them." They stared at each other, locked in another battle of wills. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware that 5 men had died and more would follow. Marco burst through the door, followed by 2 other men Clara recognized from various security details. Behind them came another man, older, gray-haired, wearing glasses and carrying a tablet, the accountant from the warehouse. "Luca," Adrian said. "Status. The Russians hit one of Dmitri's warehouses, killed him and 4 of his top people, made it look sloppy, your style, not theirs." Luca pulled up something on his tablet. "They're laying groundwork, making it look like you ordered the hit in retaliation for the gala confrontation." "Who actually did it?" "We're still working on that. But whoever it was knew enough about your operation to make it convincing." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Internal? Possible. Or someone with access to internal information." Clara's legal mind kicked in despite the fear. "So, someone killed Dmitri and framed you to start a war between you and the Russians." "That's the working theory," Luca confirmed. "Who benefits from that?" All 4 men looked at her. Adrian's expression shifted to something that might have been approval. "Smart question," he said. "Who benefits from the 2 largest crime families in New York destroying each other?" "Everyone else," Marco rumbled. "The smaller organizations, people who've been waiting for an opening." "Make a list," Adrian ordered. "Everyone who's been pushing for territory. Everyone who's made noise about expansion. Everyone with the resources to pull something like this off." Luca nodded and started typing. Adrian turned to Clara. "You need to stay here. Don't leave the penthouse. Don't talk to anyone. Marco stays with you at all times." "Where are you going?" "To meet with the Bratva, to convince them I didn't kill their boss." "That's suicide." "It's necessary." He cupped her face in his hands, the gesture almost tender. "If I don't come back, don't. If I don't come back, Luca has instructions. You'll be taken care of. The agreement stands. 6 months or 6 years. You're free. Clear?" Clara grabbed his wrists. "Then don't go." "I have to." He kissed her forehead, quick, almost protective. "Stay alive, Clara Hayes. That's an order." He left with Luca and the other 2 men, leaving Clara alone with Marco and the terrible certainty that Adrian was walking into a trap. "He's going to get himself killed," Clara said. Marco's expression was grim. "Maybe. But if anyone can talk their way out of Russian retribution, it's him." The hours crawled by. Clara tried to study, couldn't focus, ended up pacing the penthouse like a caged animal. Marco stood by the door, silent and immovable, a wall between Clara and whatever dangers lurked outside. At 8 p.m., Diane called. "Are you okay?" Diane demanded. "The news is saying Adrian's involved in that shooting. They're showing pictures of the penthouse." "Clara, please tell me you're somewhere safe." "I'm fine. I'm at the penthouse. Marco's here." "Marco, the guy who looks like he eats small cars for breakfast?" Despite everything, Clara almost laughed. "That's him." "Good. Stay there. Don't do anything stupid." "Too late. I already fell in love with a crime boss." The words were out before Clara could stop them. Silence echoed through the phone line. "Clara," Diane said softly, Please tell me you didn't just say what I think you said. I don't know what I said. I'm scared and tired, and he's out there trying to prevent a war, and I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't lose someone else, Diane. I can't. Oh, honey. Diane's voice was thick with emotion. When did this stop being fake? I don't know. Somewhere between the gala and the interview and him cooking me dinner like a normal person instead of a monster. Clara sank onto the couch. I'm in so much trouble. Yeah, you really are. They talked for another hour. About Emma's improving health, about Diane's new job opportunity, about everything except the 5 dead men and the war brewing in Brooklyn. Normal things, safe things, the kind of conversation that felt like holding on to a life Clara wasn't sure she still had. Adrian came home at midnight. Clara heard the door open from her bedroom, where she'd been pretending to sleep. She got up, padding barefoot into the living room. He stood by the windows, still in the same clothes, blood on his knuckles. You're alive, Clara said. Disappointed? Relieved. He turned to face her, and Clara saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The Russians believe me, for now. But it's fragile. What did you do to convince them? Gave them someone else to blame. Found security footage from a rival family's territory around the time of the shooting. It's not proof, but it's enough to create doubt. He flexed his bloody hand. And I made a gesture of good faith. The blood. Dimitri's second-in-command wanted satisfaction. I gave it to him. Fair fight, no weapons. First blood. Adrian smiled, cold and sharp. He got first blood. I got the last. Clara crossed to him, grabbing his hand. The knuckles were split, already swelling. You're hurt. I've had worse. She pulled him to the kitchen, running cold water over his hand while he stood there and let her. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex, this small act of care, of tending to wounds that shouldn't exist. You should have let me leave, Clara said quietly. Sent me away where I'd be safe. You wouldn't have gone. No, but you should have tried harder. Adrian caught her wrist with his uninjured hand. Why didn't you leave when you had the chance? Clara met his eyes. Because somewhere between hating you and learning to survive you, I forgot how to imagine my life without you in it. And that scares me more than the Russians ever could. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers in a gesture that was becoming familiar. We're terrible at this. At what? Keeping distance, maintaining boundaries, pretending this is just business. Maybe we should stop pretending. Maybe. His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair. But that makes this real. And real means you can get hurt. Really hurt. I'm already hurt. I've been hurt since the moment I called you baby, and you smiled instead of having me killed. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt. So if we're doing this, really doing this, then stop trying to protect me from yourself and just let me in. Adrian kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to questions he'd been asking his entire life, like she mattered more than territory or power or any of the things he'd built his empire on. They stumbled toward his bedroom, shedding clothes between kisses, and Clara stopped thinking about consequences or 6-month deals or the fact that she was falling in love with a man who ordered deaths like other people ordered takeout. When she woke up hours later, tangled in expensive sheets with Adrian's arm heavy across her waist, Clara felt the weight of what she'd done settle over her like a verdict. She'd crossed a line, blurred business into something personal, turned a transaction into something that felt dangerously close to real. Adrian stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. Morning. Is it? Clara couldn't see windows from this angle. 6 a.m. You slept 3 hours. So did you. I'm used to it. His hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Regrets? Clara thought about it. Ask me again in 6 months. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Her phone rang from somewhere in the living room, shrill and insistent. Adrian groaned. Ignore it, he said. But the ringing continued. Clara untangled herself from him, finding her clothes scattered across the floor like evidence. By the time she reached her phone, it had stopped ringing. 12 missed calls, all from numbers she didn't recognize. A text from an unknown number. Check the news. Clara's stomach dropped. She turned on the TV. The news showed the penthouse. Their penthouse, surrounded by reporters and cameras and police cars. Sources confirmed that Clara Hayes, fiancée of alleged crime boss Adrian Versetti, was present at the location where Dmitry Sokolov was last seen alive. Security footage obtained by the station shows Ms. Hayes at the Carmichael Gala engaging in what appears to be a heated confrontation with Sokolov just hours before his death. The screen showed Clara at the gala, stepping between Adrian and Dmitry. Her words about compensation and boredom played on a loop while commentators speculated about her involvement. "Oh no," Clara whispered. Adrian appeared beside her, wearing only pants, his expression dark. "They're coming after you." "The Russians?" "Worse. The FBI." As if on cue, the building's intercom buzzed. Marco's voice came through, tight with tension. "Boss, FBI. They want to talk to Ms. Hayes." Clara looked at Adrian, fear finally catching up to everything else she'd been feeling. "What do I do?" "You don't say anything, not one word." He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling our lawyers, the best criminal defense team in New York. They'll handle this." "Adrian, no!" He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. They're going to try to flip you, offer you immunity if you testify against me, tell you I'm using you, that you're in danger, that cooperating is your only way out. Don't believe them." "What if they're right?" "They're not." His voice was absolute. "I won't let anything happen to you, but you need to trust me. Can you do that?" Clara thought about the past few weeks, the gala, the interview, the way Adrian had held her last night like she was something precious instead of purchased, the fact that she'd fallen in love with him despite every reason not to. "Yes," she said, "I trust you." The lawyers arrived within 20 minutes, 3 of them, sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Clara's law school education. They set up in the dining room like it was a war room, and in a way, it was. The lead lawyer was a woman named Patricia Valdez, 50-something, with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. She'd made her reputation defending the indefensible and winning. "Here's what's going to happen," Patricia said, her tone brooking no argument. "The FBI wants to question you about your relationship with Adrian and your presence at the gala. They have footage of you confronting Dmitry Sokolov. They're building a case that you were involved in some capacity." "I wasn't." "Doesn't matter. What matters is what they can prove and what they can convince a jury to believe." Patricia pulled out a legal pad. "We're going to invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. You will not answer questions. You will not provide statements. You will sit there silent while I handle everything. Understood?" Clara nodded. "Say it out loud." "I understand." "Good." Patricia looked at Adrian. "You stay here. If they see you two together right now, it'll fuel their narrative that she's your puppet." Adrian's jaw clenched, but he nodded. They went downstairs together, Clara, Patricia, and the other 2 lawyers. The FBI agents were waiting in the lobby, 2 of them, a man and a woman, both wearing the kind of suits that said federal budget instead of custom tailored. "Ms. Hayes," the woman said, flashing credentials. "Special Agent Jennifer Morrison. This is Special Agent David Park. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Adrian Versetti and your presence at the Carmichael Gala on the night of October 15th. Patricia stepped forward. "My client will be invoking her Fifth Amendment rights and will not be answering questions at this time." Agent Morrison's expression hardened. "Ms. Hayes, we're not accusing you of anything. We just want to understand your relationship with Mr. Versetti and what you know about his business dealings." "My client invokes her Fifth Amendment rights," Patricia repeated. "You're a law student," Agent Park said, directing his words at Clara. "You understand the legal system. You know that cooperation now could mean the difference between being a witness and being a defendant." Clara opened her mouth. Patricia's hand landed on her arm, firm, warning. "Fifth Amendment," Clara said quietly. The agents tried for another 15 minutes, asking questions designed to elicit responses, painting pictures of Adrian as a monster using her, offering deals and immunity and safety if she'd just talked to them. Clara said nothing. She sat there silent, while Patricia deflected and negotiated and made it clear that this conversation was over before it had really begun. Finally, the agents left, but not before Morrison handed Clara a card. "When you're ready to talk, and you will be ready eventually, call me. We can protect you." "He can't." They walked away, and Clara felt the weight of their suspicions settle over her like handcuffs she hadn't been arrested for yet. Patricia guided her back upstairs, where Adrian was waiting, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. How bad? He asked. They're building a case, Patricia said. Circumstantial right now, but they're looking for anything that connects Clara to Dimitri's death or your business operations. The gala footage doesn't help. Can they charge her? Not yet, but if they find more evidence, or manufacture it, they could. Patricia looked at Clara. You need to be careful. Every move you make, every word you say, every person you talk to, it's all ammunition they can use. So what do I do? Clara asked. You live your life. Go to class. Study. Be the law student you are. Don't give them anything they can twist. Patricia packed up her briefcase. And Clara? Don't trust anyone except your lawyers and Adrian, not your classmates, not your friends, not anyone who comes asking questions. The FBI is very good at finding cracks. Don't be one. The lawyers left. Clara and Adrian stood in the living room, the city spread out below them, and Clara felt the cage close in a little tighter. I'm sorry, Adrian said. For what? Dragging you into this, making you a target. You gave me a choice. I made it. Clara moved to the window, watching the city wake up to a day where she was officially a person of interest in a federal investigation. I just didn't realize how expensive that choice would be. Adrian joined her, his reflection overlapping hers in the glass. You can still walk away. I'll make sure you're safe. Protected. The FBI won't touch you if you... If I what? Testify against you? Become their star witness? Clara turned to face him. Is that what you want? I want you safe. Safe and free are different things, and I'm not sure I can have both anymore. She reached up, touching the scar on his cheekbone. So I choose you, even if it's stupid, even if it destroys me. I choose you. Adrian caught her hand, pressing it against his face like a lifeline. Then I'll make sure you survive it. Promise? I promise. It was the first lie he'd told her since this started. They both knew it, but Clara let herself believe it anyway, because the alternative was admitting that she'd fallen in love with a man who couldn't save her from the consequences of loving him back. And that truth was still too sharp to hold. The next 3 weeks turned Clara's life into something she barely recognized. Law school became a gauntlet of whispers and stares. Classmates who'd never spoken to her suddenly wanted to be best friends, fishing for details about Adrian with questions disguised as concern. Professors looked at her differently, some with pity, others with barely concealed disgust. Professor Morrison called her into his office and suggested she consider taking a leave of absence until things settled down. Clara told him she'd see him in class. The FBI followed her everywhere. Not obviously, they were professionals, but Clara had learned to spot the unmarked cars, the agents pretending to read newspapers outside her building, the woman who showed up at the same coffee shop 3 days in a row. Patricia said it was intimidation tactics, meant to make Clara feel isolated and afraid. It was working. Adrian threw himself into damage control with the Russians, which meant he was gone for days at a time, coming home at 3 or 4 in the morning smelling like cigar smoke and tension. When he was there, he was distracted, constantly on the phone with Luca or other people whose names Clara didn't know, speaking in coded language about shipments and territories and problems that needed solving. They barely spoke. Barely touched. The intimacy of that first night felt like something that had happened to different people in a different life. Clara told herself it didn't matter, that this was the arrangement, business first, everything else a distant second. But lying alone in her massive bed in the middle of the penthouse, she felt the loneliness settle into her bones like winter. On the 19th day after the FBI's visit, Clara came home from a particularly brutal criminal procedure class to find Adrian in the living room with 3 men she'd never seen before. They all stopped talking the moment she walked in. Clara, Adrian said, his tone careful, we're in a meeting. I live here. I know, just give us 20 minutes. It was a dismissal, polite but absolute. Clara went to her room and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. She threw her bag on the bed and stood at the window, watching the city and trying not to cry from frustration and hurt, and the slow realization that she'd traded one kind of cage for another. 40 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Go away, Clara said. Adrian opened the door anyway. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled, the careful control he usually maintained fraying at the edges. They're gone, he said. Great, mission accomplished. You get your privacy. Don't do that. Do what? Be upset that you treat me like a child you need to protect instead of a partner you trust? You're not my partner, Adrian said, and the words landed like a punch. You're… what? Your fake fiancé? Your liability? The law student you're babysitting until the 6 months are up? Clara turned to face him, anger overriding caution. What am I to you, Adrian? Because I'm getting really tired of not knowing. He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her arms. You're the one thing in my life I can't afford to lose. You're the reason I'm negotiating with Russians instead of going to war. You're the person I think about every time I make a decision that could get me killed. That's what you are. Then stop shutting me out. I'm trying to protect you. I don't want protection. I want the truth. Clara pulled free. Who were those men? What are you planning? Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, we found who killed Dmitri. It wasn't the Russians. It was one of my own people working with a rival family, the Calabrese organization out of Jersey. They wanted to start a war, weaken both sides, and move in on the territory. Clara's legal training kicked in. Do you have proof? Enough to convince the Russians. Luca's been tracking money transfers communications. We have the traitor identified. What are you going to do to him? What do you think? Clara sat on the bed, her legs suddenly unsteady. You're going to kill him. He killed 5 people and tried to start a war that would have resulted in dozens more deaths. What would you do? I'd let the justice system… There is no justice system for people like us, Clara. Only survival. Adrian sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. This is my world. This is what I do. And if that's too much for you, if you can't reconcile the man who cooks you dinner with the man who orders executions, then maybe you should take the FBI up on their offer. Is that what you want? For me to leave? No. But I can't keep pretending you'll be safe here. The FBI is circling. The Russians are barely convinced of my innocence. And now the Calabrese family knows you exist, which makes you a target. He looked at her with something raw and desperate in his eyes. I can't protect you and run this organization. One of them is going to suffer, and I can't let it be you. Clara reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. What if I don't want to be protected? What if I want to help? How? I'm a law student. I understand evidence, testimony, how to build cases. Let me look at what Luca found. Let me help you prove the Calabrese connection in a way that convinces everyone, the Russians, your people, anyone who might doubt. Adrian studied her face. You want to help me build a case for murder. I want to help you survive. If that means using my skills to make sure the right person pays for what they did, then yes. This isn't a moot court exercise, Clara. These are real people who will really die. I know. She did know. And the fact that she was willing to help anyway told her exactly how far she'd fallen from the idealistic law student who'd wanted to fight for justice. But if someone has to die, it should be the person who actually committed the crime. That's still justice, just delivered differently. Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was trying to absorb her into his skin. You're going to regret this. Probably. But I'd regret losing you more. They sat like that for a long time, holding on to each other while the city darkened outside and the weight of what they were planning settled over them like verdict neither could appeal. Luca arrived an hour later with his tablet and a file box full of printed evidence. They spread everything across the dining room table. Financial records, surveillance photos, intercepted communications. Clara put on her lawyer hat and started organizing, categorizing, building a narrative that would convince even the most skeptical audience. The traitor's name was Vincent Russo. He'd been with Adrian's organization for 8 years, working his way up from street-level collections to managing territory in Brooklyn. He had a wife, 3 kids, a house in Staten Island with a mortgage Adrian's organization helped him secure, and he'd sold them all out for a promise of power from the Calabrese family. Here, Clara said, pointing to a series of wire transfers. He received payments 3 weeks before Dmitri's death, small amounts structured to avoid detection, but they add up to almost $200,000. Luca nodded. We traced them to a shell company owned by Michael Calabrese. And this? Clara pulled up a surveillance photo. Vincent meeting with someone outside a restaurant in Jersey City. Can we identify the other person? Angelo Marchetti, Calabrese's second-in-command. When was this taken? 2 days before the hit on Dmitri. Clara sat back, looking at the assembled evidence. This is enough. It shows motive, means, opportunity. Vincent had access to your organization's operations, knew how you conducted business, could make the hit look like your style. He had financial incentive from the Calabrese family, and he had direct contact with their leadership immediately before the murders. It's enough for you, Adrian said. But the Russians don't think like lawyers. They think like soldiers. Then give them something they understand. Vincent's confession. Luca's eyebrows rose. He hasn't confessed. Not yet. Clara looked at Adrian. But he will, won't he? The silence that followed was heavy with implications Clara couldn't quite name but understood anyway. Yes, Adrian said finally. He will. They brought Vincent in the next night. Clara didn't watch. Adrian made her stay in the penthouse while he and Marco handled it, but she heard the results. Vincent had confessed everything. The deal with Calabrese, the planning, the execution, his own ambition that had led him to betray people who treated him like family. Adrian recorded it all, showed the video to the Russian leadership. They accepted it as proof, and the fragile peace held. Then Vincent disappeared. Clara didn't ask what happened to him. She knew. And the fact that she could live with that knowledge told her exactly how much she'd changed since calling Adrian baby in that warehouse months ago. The Vanity Fair piece ran that same week. Rebecca Chen had done her job well. The article painted them as a modern romance, the powerful businessman and the brilliant law student who'd found each other against all odds. The photos were beautiful. The quotes made Clara sound intelligent and Adrian sound surprisingly human. It was all lies wrapped in enough truth to be believable. The public ate it up. Social media exploded with commentary, some supportive, some vicious, all of it dissecting their relationship like it was public property. Clara stopped reading the comments after someone posted her law school class schedule and suggested she wasn't safe there. Patricia filed for a restraining order against the most aggressive online harassers. Adrian doubled security. Clara kept going to class because giving up felt like letting them win. But everything had shifted. The FBI investigation intensified. Agent Morrison showed up at Columbia, requesting another interview that Patricia shut down immediately. They subpoenaed Adrian's financial records, which his army of lawyers fought in court. The pressure was building, and Clara could feel the walls closing in. Then Emma got sick. Diane called at midnight on a Thursday, her voice shaking. She spiked a fever. They're running tests. The doctors are worried the cancer might be back. Clara grabbed her coat. I'm coming. The hospital is crawling with reporters. Someone leaked that Emma's your niece. They're camped outside trying to get statements. I don't care. I'm coming. Marco drove her to Mount Sinai through empty streets while Clara tried to control her breathing and failed. Emma couldn't relapse, not now, not after everything they'd sacrificed to get her treatment. The hospital was exactly as Diane had warned. Reporters everywhere. Cameras flashing as Clara ran from the car to the entrance with Marco clearing a path through them like a human bulldozer. She found Diane in the waiting room, looking destroyed. They held each other while doctors ran tests, and Clara prayed to anything that might be listening that Emma would be okay. Adrian showed up an hour later, somehow managing to enter through a private entrance without press seeing him. He brought coffee and food neither of them could eat, and he sat with them in that awful waiting room like he belonged there. She's going to be fine, Adrian said. You can't know that, Clara said. She's a fighter, like you. She'll be fine. The doctor emerged at 3 a.m. with results. Emma's fever was from a regular infection, not cancer recurrence. The treatment was working. She was going to be okay. Clara collapsed against Adrian and cried. From relief, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming weight of everything that had happened in the past month. He held her and let her fall apart. And Diane watched them with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. They stayed until Emma woke up, groggy but smiling. She saw Adrian, and her eyes went wide. You're the one from the pictures, Emma said. Are you really marrying Aunt Clara? Adrian looked at Clara, something unreadable in his expression. Yes, I really am. Good. She needs someone to take care of her. She's always taking care of everyone else. I know, Adrian said softly. I'll make sure she's taken care of. Emma fell back asleep. Diane pulled Clara aside while Adrian stayed by Emma's bed, looking at the 7-year-old like she was something precious. He loves you, Diane said quietly. It's complicated. No, it's not. I've seen complicated. I've seen convenient. I've seen arrangements and business deals. This isn't that. Diane gripped Clara's hand. Whatever he is, whatever he's done, he loves you, and you love him. The rest is just details. Clara watched Adrian through the window, saw him tuck the blanket around Emma with surprising gentleness, and felt something crack open in her chest. I'm so far past the point of no return, Clara whispered. I know, but at least you're not alone there. They left the hospital at dawn. Marco drove them back to the penthouse, and Clara fell asleep against Adrian's shoulder, too exhausted to maintain distance. She woke in her bed. He must have carried her, still in yesterday's clothes. Light streamed through the windows. Her phone showed 17 missed calls. Clara stumbled into the living room and found Adrian at the dining table with Luca and two other men, studying what looked like building schematics. Clara, Adrian said, standing immediately, you should sleep more. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about. Adrian? He exchanged glances with Luca. Then, the Calabrese family knows we identified Vincent. They're planning retaliation. Clara's exhaustion evaporated. Against you? Against everyone I care about. You, Diane, Emma, my people. His jaw was tight. They're not subtle. It'll be a statement. When? We don't know. Soon. He gestured to the schematics. We're preparing, increasing security, moving people to safe houses, making sure everyone's protected. What about you? I'll be fine. That's not an answer. Adrian crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. I'm not going to let them hurt you. Any of you. Whatever it takes. Even if it means war. Even then. The attack came 2 days later, but not the way anyone expected. Clara was in civil procedure when Marco burst into the classroom, not caring about the 30 students and Professor Chen staring at him. Ms. Hayes, now. Clara grabbed her bag and ran. In the car, Marco explained through clenched teeth. Someone hit the penthouse, tried to plant a bomb. Building security caught them, but it was close. Too close. Is Adrian? He's fine. He wasn't there. But Clara, they got through our security. Someone on the inside helped them. Another traitor. Another person Adrian had trusted, who'd sold them out. The penthouse was surrounded by police when they arrived. Patricia was already there, managing the situation with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Adrian stood by the windows, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and dangerous. He saw Clara and ended the call immediately, crossing to her in 3 strides. Are you okay? I'm fine. Marco got me out of class. Good. He turned to Marco. Get her to the safe house. Staten Island location. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Wait, what? Clara grabbed his arm. I'm not going to a safe house. Yes, you are. This isn't negotiable. The hell it isn't. I'm staying with you. Clara, but... No. She planted herself in front of him, refusing to budge. You said I was yours. You said you protect what's yours. Well, it goes both ways. I'm not running while you stay here and fight. This is different. They tried to blow up the building, with you in it. And they failed. So we figure out who helped them and we stop it from happening again. Adrian's control was fracturing. She could see it in his eyes, the fear he wouldn't name and the fury he couldn't quite contain. I can't lose you. Then don't push me away. They stood there, locked in another battle of wills while chaos swirled around them. Finally, Adrian pulled her close, his hand fisting in her hair. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met, he said against her ear. You chose me. Deal with it. Luca approached, his expression grim. Boss, we found him. The insider? Yeah. You're not going to like it. They went to Adrian's office, the real one, in a building in Midtown that served as headquarters for his legitimate business operations. The room was all dark wood and leather, the kind of space that screamed power and money and decisions that changed lives. The traitor was already there, tied to a chair, bleeding from a split lip. He looked up when they entered, and Clara's breath caught. She knew him. Tony. The man with glasses from the warehouse, the one who'd stood beside Adrian during meetings, managed schedules, arranged details. Tony? Clara said, disbelief coloring her voice. Tony's eyes met hers, filled with something that looked like shame. I'm sorry, they have my daughter. The Calabrese family. They took her 2 weeks ago. Said they'd kill her if I didn't help them. Adrian's expression was carved from stone. Why didn't you come to me? You were dealing with the Russians. I didn't want to add to it, and they said they'd know if I told anyone. They'd kill her immediately. So you let them plant a bomb instead. I disabled the timer, made sure it wouldn't actually go off. I just needed them to think I'd followed through so they'd let Sarah go. Clara looked at Adrian, seeing the war playing across his face. Tony had betrayed them, but for his daughter. It was the kind of impossible choice that had no right answer. Where's Sarah now? Adrian asked. I don't know. They move her every few days. She calls me for 60 seconds to prove she's alive, and that's it. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Luca, I need a trace on Tony's daughter. Get our people on it. Every resource we have. Find her. He hung up and looked at Tony. You should have trusted me. I would have helped you. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, but saving Sarah might. Adrian moved to the window. We find your daughter. We get her back. Then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about loyalty and trust and what happens when you break both. Tony nodded, understanding the implicit threat. Clara followed Adrian to the window. You're going to help him? His daughter's 15 years old. This isn't her fault. Adrian's voice was hard. But he's going to pay for this. Just not the way he expected. It took Luca's team 36 hours to locate Sarah. She was being held in a warehouse in Newark, guarded by 3 of Calabrese's men. Adrian planned the extraction with military precision. His people going in quiet, getting the girl out before anyone knew what was happening. Clara insisted on coming. Absolutely not, Adrian said. I'm a witness. If this goes to court, I can testify that you rescued a kidnapped child from dangerous criminals. That plays well for your public image. This isn't about public image. Everything's about public image when the FBI is investigating you. Clara crossed her arms. I'm coming. You can argue, or you can let me help. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, then, you stay in the car. You don't leave Marco's sight. If shooting starts, you get down and stay down. Deal. They drove to Newark after midnight, 3 cars, 12 men, and Clara wearing a bulletproof vest that Adrian had insisted on, even though she'd be nowhere near the actual extraction. The warehouse was industrial, abandoned, exactly the kind of place you'd hide a kidnapped teenager. Adrian's team moved with practiced efficiency, spreading out around the building while Luca coordinated through headsets. Clara watched from the car, her heart hammering as shadows moved through the darkness. Beside her, Marco was completely still, his hand resting on the gun in his shoulder holster. This is what he does, Clara said quietly. Isn't it? Rescue people, fix problems, take care of his own. Among other things, Marco confirmed. Boss isn't just what people think. He's more complicated than that. Gunshots cracked through the night. Clara flinched. Marco's hand tightened on his weapon. Stay down, he ordered. More shots, shouting, then silence. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. We have her. She's safe. Relief flooded through her. They waited while Adrian's team secured the area, taking out Calabrese's guards with efficient violence that Clara tried not to think too hard about. Then Adrian emerged from the warehouse with a teenage girl wrapped in a blanket, her face tear-stained but alive. Tony was there immediately, pulling his daughter into his arms, both of them crying. Adrian watched them for a moment. Then he walked to the car and got in beside Clara. 3 guards down, he said quietly. 2 wounded, 1 dead. Calabrese will know it was us. Good, Clara said. Let him know. Adrian looked at her, something dark and approving in his expression. You're bloodthirsty tonight. They kidnapped a child. They tried to blow up our home. I'm done being diplomatic. So am I. The war with the Calabrese family lasted another week. It was brutal, efficient, and entirely one-sided. Adrian had been holding back, trying to avoid collateral damage and keep civilian casualties to 0. But Clara's words had unlocked something in him, permission to stop playing nice. He dismantled Calabrese's operation piece by piece, froze their assets through legal channels, bought out their protection, turned their own people against them with better offers and ironclad guarantees. And when Michael Calabrese himself tried to negotiate a truce, Adrian invited him to dinner at a neutral restaurant and made him an offer. Leave New York. Take your family and go. I'll give you 48 hours and safe passage. or stay and watch me destroy everything you've built over the next month. Calabrese chose survival. Within 3 days, the entire organization had dissolved or been absorbed into Adrian's network. The FBI investigation stalled out. Without active violence, and with all the evidence pointing at Calabrese for Dimitri's death and the attempted bombing, they couldn't build a case against Adrian. Agent Morrison showed up one last time to tell Clara she was making a mistake. "He's going to drag you down," Morrison said. "Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually his world will destroy yours." "Maybe," Clara said, "but it'll be my choice, not yours." Morrison left, and Clara felt something like victory. The semester ended. Clara took her finals while living in a penthouse with a man the FBI suspected of murder. She aced every exam because she'd learned to compartmentalize, to separate the law student from the crime boss's fiancé, to be both people at once without letting either destroy the other. Her grades posted 3 days before Christmas. Straight A's. Adrian took her to dinner to celebrate, a small restaurant in Little Italy that he owned through 7 layers of shell companies. They sat in the back corner, away from windows, while Marco and 2 other guards maintained a perimeter that felt less necessary now, but that neither of them questioned. 4 months down, Adrian said, raising his wine glass. 2 to go. Clara clinked her glass against his. And then what? Then you're free. No debt, no obligation. You walk away and live your life however you want. Clara set down her glass. What if I don't want to walk away? The question hung between them, heavy with everything they'd been avoiding. Clara. No, I'm serious. What if the past 4 months weren't just an arrangement? What if somewhere between fighting the FBI and surviving the Calabrese family and watching you rescue a kidnapped girl, I actually fell in love with you? Adrian was silent, his expression unreadable. Say something, Clara demanded. I'm trying to figure out if you're serious or if this is Stockholm Syndrome. I'm serious, and it's probably both. But I don't care anymore. Clara reached across the table, taking his hand. I love you. The real you. The man who cooks dinner and rescues teenagers and orders executions without blinking. All of it. And I know it's crazy. And I know it's probably going to destroy me eventually, but I can't walk away. I don't want to. Adrian's grip tightened on her hand. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Maybe. But I don't want better. I want you. He pulled her close, kissing her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I love you too, he said quietly. I've loved you since you called me baby and looked terrified and defiant at the same time. I've just been trying not to doom you by admitting it. Too late, I'm already doomed. Yeah, Adrian agreed. We both are. They left the restaurant and drove home through a city that felt different now, less like a battlefield and more like possibility. The penthouse welcomed them with warm light and the promise of a future Clara had stopped trying to predict. She fell asleep in Adrian's arms that night, the ring on her finger feeling less like a prop and more like a promise. And for the first time since this started, Clara let herself believe they might actually survive this. Together. Against everything. For real. Christmas morning arrived with snow falling over Manhattan, the kind of picture-perfect scene that belonged in movies rather than real life. Clara woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Merry Christmas, he said softly. We don't have to do this, Clara said, understanding what he wasn't saying. The whole holiday thing. I know it's not. I got you something. He reached into the nightstand and pulled out a small box. Not a ring box. She already had that particular piece of jewelry. This was different. Older, worn at the edges. Clara sat up, taking it carefully. Inside was a locket, gold and delicate, with an inscription on the back in Italian. What does it say? Clara asked. Courage is choosing love even when fear says run. Adrian's voice was quiet. It was my mother's. She wore it every day until she died. I want you to have it. Clara's throat tightened. Adrian, I can't. This is too much. It's not enough. He took the locket, fastening it around her neck with careful hands. You've survived the FBI, the Russians, the Calabrese family, and me. If anyone's earned the right to wear it, it's you. Clara touched the locket, feeling the weight of history and trust, and something that felt dangerously close to forever. I got you something too. It's not as meaningful, but she pulled out a small wrapped package from her own nightstand. Inside was a first edition of The Great Gatsby, the dust jacket pristine despite its age. Adrian's eyes widened. Clara, this is... How did you even... I have my ways, and before you ask, I paid for it myself. With money I earned tutoring undergrads, not with anything you gave me. She smiled. I wanted you to have something that was just for me. No strings, no arrangements, just a gift. He pulled her close, the book pressed between them, and kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd been too afraid to ask. They spent Christmas morning in bed, trading stories about holidays past, his full of boarding schools and nannies after his mother died, hers full of her parents making magic out of nothing until the car accident took them both. It was the most honest conversation they'd had, stripped of performance and pretense, just two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it work. Diane and Emma arrived at noon, Emma practically vibrating with excitement over the presents and the fancy penthouse and the fact that Aunt Clara lived somewhere that had a doorman. The four of them had dinner together, Adrian cooking again, making Italian dishes his mother had taught him, while Emma told them elaborate stories about her favorite dinosaurs, and Diane watched with an expression that said she was finally starting to believe this might actually be real. He's good with her, Diane said quietly while Adrian and Emma debated whether velociraptors or T-Rexes were superior predators. He's good with everyone he cares about, Clara said. It's everyone else who has to worry. And you're sure about this? About him? Clara looked at Adrian, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd walked into her life and changed everything. I've never been more sure of anything. The 6-month mark arrived with less fanfare than Clara expected. No dramatic confrontation, no final test, just a Tuesday in February when Clara realized she'd been living with Adrian for half a year and couldn't imagine living anywhere else. She was studying for the bar exam, graduating early because she'd crammed enough credits and had grades that qualified her for acceleration, when Adrian came home early from a meeting. "We need to talk," he said, and Clara's stomach dropped. Those 4 words. Never good. She closed her laptop. Okay. Adrian sat across from her, his expression serious. The 6 months are up. Technically, as of today, you're free. No more arrangement, no more obligation. You can walk away. Clara had known this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a punch. Is that what you want? No. But it's what we agreed. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Everything's in there. Proof that your debts are cleared. Emma's medical bills paid for the next 5 years. Diane's mortgage satisfied. Your law school loans forgiven. A cashier's check for $200,000 as agreed, adjusted for inflation and with interest. Clara looked at the folder like it was a live grenade. You're paying me to leave. I'm honoring our agreement. What you do next is your choice. And if I choose to stay, Adrian's mask cracked slightly, then we need to renegotiate terms. What terms? The real ones. Not a fake engagement, not an arrangement, just us, you and me, building something that might actually last beyond the next crisis. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. But Clara, you need to understand what you're signing up for. The FBI will always be watching. There will always be enemies, always danger, always the possibility that one day I'll make the wrong call and we'll both pay for it. I know. Do you? Because knowing it theoretically and living it are different things. Once you commit, really commit, there's no walking it back. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, and everyone will know it. That makes you a permanent target. Clara thought about the past 6 months. The fear and the danger and the FBI interviews, the way she'd learned to sleep through sirens and ignore death threats on social media. The strange comfort of Marco's constant presence and the way she'd stopped flinching when Adrian came home with blood on his knuckles. She thought about Emma, healthy and laughing, her hair growing back in soft curls. About Diane, who'd finally stopped working 3 jobs and had started dating someone nice who made her smile. About the life she'd built in Adrian's shadow, the way she'd become someone she barely recognized but somehow liked better than the girl she'd been. I'm not walking away, Clara said. I love you. And yeah, it's complicated and dangerous and probably going to get me killed someday. But I'd rather have that than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Adrian pulled out another box, different from the locket, different from the engagement ring that had started this whole thing. Inside was a new ring. Still beautiful, still expensive, but different, more delicate, more personal. The first ring was for show, Adrian said. This one's real. No arrangement, no timeline, just a question. He took her hand. Clara Hayes, will you actually marry me? For real this time. Clara's vision blurred. You're seriously proposing? I'm seriously asking. You can say no. You can take the money and leave and build a life far away from all this. Or you can say yes and let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Clara looked at the ring, then at Adrian, then at the folder full of documents that represented her freedom. For 6 months, she'd been living a lie that had slowly transformed into truth. Now she had a choice: walk away with her debts cleared and her future secure, or stay and build something real with a man who'd probably break her heart and might get her killed. It wasn't even close. Yes, Clara said. I'll marry you. For real this time. Adrian slid the new ring onto her finger beside the old one and kissed her like he'd been holding his breath for 6 months and could finally exhale. They set the wedding for June. Small ceremony, immediate family only, in the penthouse with a judge Patricia knew who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. No press, no cameras, no society matrons pretending to be happy for them. Just the people who mattered. But planning the wedding meant dealing with everything they'd been avoiding. Merging their lives officially meant Clara needed to understand exactly what she was marrying into. I want full transparency, Clara said one night while they were reviewing prenup documents that Patricia had drawn up. No more meetings I'm excluded from. No more decisions made without telling me. If I'm going to be your wife, I need to know everything. Adrian set down his pen. Everything? Everything that matters. I'm not asking for criminal confessions I'd have to report to the Bar Association, but the big picture. How your organization works, who your allies are, what threats we're facing. I can't help you if I'm in the dark. You want to be involved? I am involved. I have been since the gala. I'm just making it official. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Luca. Get up here. Bring the org charts and the current threat assessment. Clara's getting read in. Luca arrived within the hour with Marco and another man Clara had seen but never met. Someone Adrian introduced as his attorney, though not the kind who appeared in court. They spread out documents that showed the real structure of Adrian's empire. The legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, import-export, the gray area operations, gambling, protection, strategic acquisitions that skirted legality. And the darker side, Clara had always known existed but never seen documented. This is everyone who reports directly to me, Adrian said, pointing to a chart. Luca handles finances and intelligence. Marco handles security. Vincent, he gestured to the attorney, handles legal issues and makes problems disappear. Below them are the territory managers, collection specialists, and enforcement. Enforcement, Clara repeated. That's a polite word. Yes. How many people have died because of decisions you've made? The room went silent. Luca and Marco exchanged glances. Vincent suddenly found his tablet fascinating. Directly? 12. Adrian's voice was steady. Indirectly? More. I don't have an exact number. Clara felt sick. But she'd asked for honesty, and this was what honesty looked like. And if you could go back, would you change anything? No. Every person I ordered killed had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. They'd hurt innocent people, betrayed trust, endangered families. I don't apologize for protecting what's mine. Even if what's yours includes illegal operations? Even then, Clara looked at the charts, the territories, the web of connections that made Adrian Versetti one of the most powerful men in New York. She could walk away. Should walk away. Everything about this was wrong by every moral standard she'd been taught. But watching Adrian stand there, unflinching in his honesty, refusing to apologize for being exactly who he was, she understood something she'd been avoiding for months. Right and wrong weren't as clear as law school had taught her. Justice didn't always come from courtrooms, and sometimes the people who broke laws were the same ones who protected the vulnerable from worse monsters. Okay, Clara said. Show me the rest. They spent the next 3 hours going through everything. Adrian answered every question, no matter how uncomfortable. He showed her the books, both sets, the ones the IRS saw, and the ones that showed where the real money moved. He explained the protection rackets, how they worked, why business owners actually wanted them despite paying for services they shouldn't need. He walked her through the gambling operations, the careful balance of keeping things profitable without attracting federal attention. And he told her about the charitable work nobody knew about, the anonymous donations to hospitals, the shelters for domestic violence survivors that his organization funded and protected, the way he made sure kids in his territories had food and school supplies even when their parents couldn't provide, the informal justice system that resolved disputes the courts wouldn't touch. "You're a criminal with a conscience," Clara said as dawn broke over the city. "I'm a pragmatist who understands that chaos is bad for business. Happy communities don't breed informants. Protected people stay loyal. It's all strategic." "You keep telling yourself that," Adrian smiled. "I do, daily." The bar exam came in late April. Clara studied with the intensity of someone whose entire future hinged on passing, even though her future was already secured regardless of the results. She wanted this, wanted to prove she could do it, wanted the validation of succeeding on her own merit. Adrian cleared his schedule the week before the exam, quizzing her on civil procedure and constitutional law while she paced the penthouse reciting rules and exceptions and the endless nuances that made law both beautiful and maddening. She took the exam over 2 days, emerging each evening exhausted and wired, convinced she'd failed, and also somehow certain she'd aced it. Adrian was waiting each night with dinner and wine and the kind of quiet support that meant more than any grand gesture could have. Results wouldn't come for months, but Clara felt lighter having it done. One more step toward being fully herself: lawyer, fiancé, partner to a man whose business card should probably read criminal entrepreneur instead of CEO. The week before the wedding, the FBI made one last attempt. Agent Morrison showed up at the penthouse with her partner and a warrant to search the premises. They tore through everything: files, computers, personal belongings, looking for evidence they wouldn't find because Adrian had known this was coming and moved anything remotely incriminating months ago. Clara watched them work with Patricia standing beside her, both women silent as federal agents tried and failed to build a case that had died when Calabrese left New York. "This is harassment," Patricia said calmly. "You have no new evidence, no probable cause beyond suspicion. I'll be filing a complaint with your supervisors." Morrison ignored her, approaching Clara one last time. "Last chance. You're about to marry him. Legally bind yourself to his crimes. When we finally catch him, and we will, you'll go down too. Is that really what you want?" Clara looked at this woman who'd spent months trying to save her from a fate Clara had chosen willingly. "Agent Morrison, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But you're operating under the assumption that I'm a victim. I'm not. I made my choice with full knowledge of the consequences. So yes, this is what I want. You'll regret it. Maybe, but it'll be my regret, not yours." The agents left empty-handed, and Patricia assured Clara they wouldn't be back. The warrant had been a last-ditch effort based on pressure from higher-ups who wanted Adrian arrested on principle. Without evidence, it was just theater. Adrian came home to find Clara drinking wine on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and crimson. "They came," she said without turning around. "I know. Marco called me." He joined her at the railing. "You handled it well. I'm getting good at this. The lying, the deflecting, the choosing you over everything I used to believe about right and wrong. Second thoughts?" "Daily." Clara turned to face him. "But I'm marrying you anyway, next week, in front of people we love, for real." "For real," Adrian echoed. "I just need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't get killed. Don't go to prison. Don't make me regret believing that we could actually pull this off." Her voice cracked slightly. "Because I love you, and I'm choosing this. But I'm also terrified that one day I'll wake up and you'll be gone, and I'll have nothing but the memory of thinking we were invincible." Adrian pulled her close, his arms solid and warm around her. "I can't promise I'll live forever. This life doesn't come with guarantees, but I can promise that every day I have, I'll spend trying to build something that lasts. For us. For the people we care about, for the future we're making." "That's not exactly reassuring." "It's honest. That's better." Clara buried her face in his chest and let herself believe him. The wedding was everything Clara hadn't known she wanted. Simple, intimate, real. Diane stood beside her as maid of honor, wearing a dress that didn't make her look like a bridesmaid so much as an actual human being. Emma was flower girl, scattering petals, with the seriousness of someone entrusted with a vital mission. Marco stood up for Adrian, looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo but managing not to scowl at the guests. The judge was efficient, reading the standard vows with enough gravitas to make them feel significant. When it came time for the personal vows, Adrian went first. Clara, you walked into my life by accident and stayed on purpose. You've survived every terrible thing I've thrown at you and somehow came out stronger. You make me want to be better than I am, even when I know I'll probably fail. I promise to protect you, to be honest with you, to love you even when it's inconvenient or dangerous or stupid. You're mine, and I'm yours, and everything else is just details. Clara's turn. She looked at this man who'd blackmailed her into his life and somehow earned her love anyway. Adrian, 6 months ago I called you baby by accident and you could have killed me. Instead, you changed my entire life. You paid for my niece's treatment, cleared my debts, gave me a future I never could have built alone. But more than that, you saw me, the real me, not the struggling law student or the desperate niece or the girl out of her depth. You saw someone worth investing in, worth protecting, worth loving. I promise to stand beside you, to be your partner, not your liability. To love you for exactly who you are, not who I wish you could be. We're terrible at conventional. Let's be excellent at this instead. The judge pronounced them married. Adrian kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission. Their handful of guests applauded, and Clara felt something settle into place, the sense that she'd finally arrived somewhere she was meant to be. The reception was small, dinner at the penthouse, just family and the handful of people who'd helped them survive the past 6 months. Luca gave a surprisingly emotional toast about loyalty and trust. Diane cried happy tears and told Adrian if he hurt her sister, she'd find a way to destroy him that the FBI hadn't thought of. Emma declared the cake was the best thing she'd ever eaten and asked if they could do this every week. Clara's bar results arrived 3 weeks later. She'd passed. Not just passed, scored in the top 10%. The letter came with an offer from a prestigious firm that Patricia had recommended her to, contingent on background checks that Clara knew would be interesting given her new last name. She showed Adrian the letter over breakfast. "You're taking it," he said immediately. "They'll run a background check, find out who I married, withdraw the offer. Then you'll find another firm. Or start your own practice. Or work for me. I could use a brilliant lawyer who actually understands criminal law from both sides." Clara considered it. That last option is basically asking for a conflict of interest investigation. Welcome to my world. Everything's a conflict of interest. We just manage it carefully. Is this really going to work? Me being a lawyer while married to you? People make stranger things work. Adrian took her hand. You've earned this. Don't let my reputation take it from you. Clara called the firm, accepted the position, waited for the background check to come back. It came back clean, or clean enough. The firm knew who she'd married. They also knew she'd had no involvement in any criminal activity, had passed the character and fitness evaluation, and had references that spoke to her integrity. They offered her the position anyway, with the caveat that she'd need to recuse herself from any cases involving her husband's interests. Clara accepted. Her first day, she walked into a Manhattan law office wearing a suit she'd bought with her own money, carrying a briefcase that Adrian had given her as a graduation present, and introduced herself as Clara Verschetti, attorney at law. It felt like victory. The first year of marriage was an education in balance. Clara learned to be both, the lawyer who fought for justice in courtrooms, and the wife who understood her husband ordered executions over dinner. She defended clients who needed help and turned a blind eye to the aspects of Adrian's business she legally couldn't acknowledge. It required compartmentalization that would have broken the person she'd been before meeting him. But Clara had changed, adapted, become someone capable of holding contradictions without fracturing. Emma went into full remission. Diane got remarried to the nice man she'd been dating. Clara won her first major case, a pro bono defense of a domestic violence survivor accused of murdering her abuser, and came home to find Adrian had bought out the restaurant where they'd had their first real conversation so they could celebrate privately. "You bought a restaurant," Clara said, still processing. "I bought you a Victory dinner location. There's a difference. Normal people just make reservations." "Normal is boring. We established that on day one." They ate in the empty restaurant, just the two of them and a chef Adrian had hired for the night, and Clara realized she'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. This was her life now. Complicated, dangerous, morally ambiguous, and somehow perfectly suited to who she'd become. The second year brought new challenges. A rival organization tried to move into Adrian's territory. Clara used her legal expertise to tie them up in zoning disputes and permit issues while Adrian handled the more direct approaches. They worked together, a partnership that functioned better than either of them alone. The FBI eventually gave up active investigation, though Morrison sent Clara a card on their wedding anniversary that just said, "Still time to change your mind." Clara sent back a card that said, "Happy and safe, but thanks for caring." Morrison didn't write again. Melissa finished law school and joined Clara's firm. She knew who Clara had married, everyone did, but she also knew Clara was still the same person underneath the designer clothes and penthouse address. They grabbed coffee between court appearances and complained about judges and difficult clients like normal lawyers, and it helped Clara remember she was still herself despite everything. 3 years into the marriage, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test in the bathroom of the penthouse, her mind racing through implications. A child. Their child. An innocent person who'd be born into Adrian's world with all its dangers and complications. She found Adrian in his office, reviewing reports with Luca. They both looked up when she entered. "I need to talk to you," Claire said. "Alone." Luca excused himself immediately. Adrian stood, concern crossing his features. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Or everything is. I'm not sure yet." Clara sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I'm pregnant." Adrian froze. "Pregnant?" "Yes. About 6 weeks, according to the test. I haven't seen a doctor yet, but..." He was across the room in 2 strides, pulling her up and into his arms. "We're having a baby. You're happy about this? Are you not?" Clara pulled back to look at him. "I'm terrified. We're bringing a child into your world, our world, the same world that includes FBI investigations and rival organizations and violence. How do we protect them from that? The same way we protect each other, carefully, completely, with every resource we have." Adrian's hand settled on her still flat stomach. "This child will be loved, protected, given every advantage we can provide. And yes, they'll grow up knowing their father isn't conventional, but they'll also know he's honest, loyal, committed to family above everything." "What if it's not enough? Then we'll figure it out, together, like we figured out everything else." Clara let herself believe him. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, weighing 7 pounds and 3 ounces, with Adrian's dark hair and Clara's stubborn expression. They named her Sophia, after Adrian's mother, and she immediately became the most protected child in New York. Marco, terrifying enforcer and loyal bodyguard, cried when he held her for the first time. Luca opened a trust fund that would ensure Sophia never wanted for anything. Diane and Emma visited constantly, Emma delighted to finally be a big cousin. And Adrian, ruthless crime boss who'd built an empire on fear and calculation, became the most devoted father Clara had ever seen. He changed diapers and handled 3 a.m. feedings and sang Italian lullabies his mother had taught him. He installed security that would make the Secret Service jealous and vetted every nanny candidate like they were applying for national security clearance. "She's made you soft," Clara teased one night, watching him rock Sophia to sleep. "She's made me realize what actually matters," Adrian corrected. "Everything I've built, all of it, is so she can grow up safe, protected, free to choose her own path. Even if that path is becoming a kindergarten teacher in Iowa? Even then. Though I'd prefer she at least visit occasionally." Sophia grew, started walking, started talking. Her first word was Dada, which made Adrian insufferable for a week. Her second word was Marco, which made their head of security cry again. By the time she was 3, Sophia had the entire organization wrapped around her tiny finger. Hardened criminals brought her toys. Territory managers asked about her birthday preferences. The most feared men in New York's underworld turned into softened puddles when she smiled at them. "We've created a monster," Clara said, watching Sophia command Marco to play Tea Party. "We've created perfection," Adrian corrected. Clara passed the bar in 2 more states, building a practice that handled everything from pro bono criminal defense to corporate law. She made partner at her firm. Won cases that set precedents, built a reputation separate from her husband's, though everyone still knew exactly who she'd married. She and Adrian settled into a rhythm. He ran his empire with calculated precision. She navigated the legal world with hard-earned skill. They raised Sophia together, protecting her from the worst of Adrian's world while preparing her for the realities she'd eventually need to understand. Some nights, Clara still thought about that warehouse, the moment she'd called him baby and changed the trajectory of her entire life. How terrified she'd been, how certain she was going to die, and how instead she'd found this, a life built on impossible foundations that somehow held steady through every storm. Emma graduated high school cancer-free, heading to college with scholarships and a future Clara had once thought impossible. Diane had 2 more kids with her husband and sent Clara photos of their growing family with messages about how grateful she was for everything. The debts that had once defined Clara's existence were distant memories. The desperation that had driven her to that warehouse had been replaced by a different kind of urgency, the need to be worthy of the second chance she'd been given. On their 5th anniversary, Adrian took Clara back to the Plaza Hotel, where they'd had their first public appearance as a couple. The ballroom was empty except for the 2 of them, reserved for the night at astronomical cost. 5 years, Adrian said, pulling her onto the dance floor. You've survived 5 years of me. You've survived 5 years of me correcting your legal assumptions, Clara countered. Fair point. He spun her gently, the movement practiced and familiar. Do you ever regret it, saying yes that night? Clara thought about it honestly. Sometimes I regret how we started. The coercion, the manipulation, the way you backed me into a corner and made me choose survival over principles. I know. I'm sorry for that. But I don't regret where we ended up, this life we've built. Sophia, us, even the complicated parts. She rested her head against his chest. You gave me a choice when I had none, and somehow that lack of choice became the best decision I ever made. You gave me something I thought I'd never have, Adrian said quietly. Someone who knew exactly what I was and loved me anyway, not despite the darkness, including it. They danced in the empty ballroom while the city glittered around them, and Clara understood something fundamental. Love wasn't always soft or easy or morally simple. Sometimes it was choosing the complicated person over the simple path. Sometimes it was building something beautiful out of broken pieces. Sometimes it was looking at a life you'd never planned and recognizing it as exactly where you belonged. The word that had started everything, baby, slipped out in terror and desperation, had become something they used tenderly. A reminder of how far they'd come. A private joke between 2 people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and made it work anyway. Years later, when Sophia asked how her parents met, Clara and Adrian looked at each other and smiled. It's complicated, Clara said. But worth it, Adrian added. Like us, they said together. And it was true. All of it. The complications and the worth and the impossible reality of 2 people who should never have worked but somehow built an empire together. Not just of territory and power, but of trust and partnership and the kind of love that survived FBI investigations and gang wars and every obstacle the world threw at them. Clara Hayes had walked into a warehouse to save her niece and walked out engaged to a crime boss. She'd been terrified and desperate and absolutely certain it would destroy her. She'd been wrong. It hadn't destroyed her. It had transformed her into someone stronger, someone capable of holding contradictions, someone who could be both the brilliant lawyer fighting for justice and the wife who understood that justice sometimes wore an expensive suit and made decisions that couldn't be defended in court. She'd found her place in Adrian's world not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more completely herself. Flawed and fierce and uncompromising in her own way. And the man who'd blackmailed her into his life had become the person she trusted most in the world, the father of her child, the partner who made her better without requiring her to be perfect. They'd built something real out of a foundation of lies, created a family from an arrangement, turned 6 months into forever. It wasn't the life Clara had planned. It wasn't even the life she would have chosen if given better options. But standing in that ballroom 5 years later, dancing with the man who'd saved her by destroying everything she thought she knew about herself, Clara understood that the best lives were rarely the planned ones. Sometimes they started with a careless word in a dangerous place. Sometimes they were built by people brave enough, or foolish enough, to choose love over safety. Sometimes they required becoming someone you never imagined just to discover you'd been that person all along. Clara had called Adrian Verschetti baby by accident and fallen in love with him on purpose. And that choice, terrifying and reckless and completely imperfect, had given her everything that mattered: a family, a future, a partnership built on brutal honesty instead of pretty lies. And in the end, that was worth more than all the conventional happiness in the world. The word belonged only to him now, and she belonged to herself. And somehow, impossibly, both things were true at once. That was the real magic. Not the money or the power or the life she'd built, but the fact that she'd stayed herself while becoming his. And that made all the difference.